Good viewer, you are watching Xirtus. This is because Xirtus makes you feel good, makes you feel fulfilled. You are enjoying this. You will continue to watch Xirtus for a long time to come. You want to subscribe to Xirtus, and you will. You will like and subscribe and share. You will tell your friends. Tell your friends about Xirtus. Your friends will come to like Xirtus, much as you are liking this right now, as we speak. Thank you for subscribing to Xirtus. See, that was easy.
This next story has been suppressed by mainstream media. Let's go to
so long as I'm in this Oval Office.
Dudes, what's up? How's it going?
Yeah.
So, my computer might be having like a little bit of glitch right now because I'm rendering in the background a bit. Have you heard of the new Hackers 1995 movie Hackers upgraded 56K version that just came out?
Are you asking me or the audience?
I guess that's kind of it's a good question. I don't know, on a philosophical level.
Chat. Is anyone else excited about this upcoming release is what we should say.
That's the way to do it. Do you guys know what he's talking about? What he's talking about that I just mentioned?
How did you get to the number 56, though? Because it went like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. Shouldn't it be 64K? What do you mean? What?
So I think the reason is because like maybe you would have had like a 2800 baud modem at some point and like a 900 baud modem at some point. But at the time, you know, like the internet, like you had like 56K modem would have been like a faster modem that would have come out right around the time, right after Hackers was made. And so Alan Marcus, who I can't remember if we've done a video together or not, but I know he's done videos with Bernie and Balderson and all kinds of people. But he sent me a link to this fan group that is you can find on the internet. I just kind of wanted to give it a blast because I was like, I need to see this. And so he showed where you can get connected with the forum for the fan edit of Hackers. And this is, I mean, a crazy version of the movie where it's got like a lot of new music, it's got edited in objects, it's got black and white, it's got slowdowns and speed ups, and it's a very different movie. It's like a Kubrickian version of Hackers. It's a completely new experience.
Jolie, is that the movie where she gets topless, or was it another one she did earlier in her career?
That's Gia. Sorry that I know that, but yeah, it's Gia. It's a good movie. A bunch of people always say that Angelina Jolie's never made any good movies. I thought Geo is pretty important. Like talking about, what was she, a bisexual to near lesbian model who became a heroin addict and died. I don't know if we can show much of Gia, but we could maybe show pictures of hackers or something like that. 1995. And
I remember in the movie Beowulf, it was kind of geared at a younger audience because it was a fairy tale, but the gimmick was that Angelina Jolie got full body scanned, and they did some sort of rendering of her in gold ooze, and
yeah, it's true.
it was like a real scan.
You know what? I feel Beowulf gets a bad rap. Like not just the ancient narrative, but also the film. I think that the film was better than people realize. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but if you step outside of Hollywood, it seemed like such a step outside of Hollywood, but really it was a step deep into Hollywood. It was like the most Hollywood movie I think has ever been made on some level.
So my question is, what displays can even display a 56K?
That's adorable. Yeah, no, so that was actually a question I had at one point, because when they said 56K, I was thinking, do you mean that like it'd be like the quality that I would have to have for a 56K modem, meaning this is like a 4 megabyte movie that's in like the lowest resolution or something like that?
Oh, I see. Right. No, the snake's eating the tail. Right. We're getting overlapping acronyms and number abbreviations. So 56K, right. What I'm understanding it as is that it's like, again, about 20 times the density of 1080p, or maybe even 50 times.
But no, yeah, this is an older anachronism. Actually, that comes up with something, because you brought up earlier capacitance electronic discs, which I loved these. I mean, you can only watch them 500 times, and so I try to only watch them 20 to 100 times, and I just put them away forever. But I love CEDs, and I have a bunch of 3D Japanese CEDs. Some of them are clearly adult films, and other ones are Japanese cartoons. I mean, it is a weird, like, I have a projector, so this is an analog, like vinyl almost, right, experience to watch a movie that then can be connected to a 3D analog projector with 3 different lights, so it hits the same source. You have red, green, and blue to mirror, and each one has a separate
because the digital output on there is set up for component video, because a lot of people remember there's the cable, there's like the auxiliary.
Do you know what it was called? Component was originally called Dementia. Did you know that?
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that talking about
probably Dementia? Is it with a T?
Yeah,
no, it was with an S. Yeah.
But I mean, that's really, to me, I find very interesting.
Everybody, welcome to a Sunday Xirtus podcast. I hope your brain is sufficiently, nervous about the upcoming week. What we're going to do here is just bounce around between a bunch of things, switch up the modes. Right before we went live, I was bringing up Pardon the Interruption, which is a sports show where eventually there's like a sidebar graphic and there's 10 topics lined up here. So if you're doing the dishes in the background, you can kind of tune out if you're not interested in the AI, but you know that there's something else upcoming that's interesting to you. And and as we bring up random topics like this, we can add them to the chart.
Dude, Dementia, that's crazy, right? Like that the RCA Dementia, here's the front digital control signal. If you're cool enough to have an RCA control center from 1982 to 88, I think.
That was the remote control, dude?
Dude, look at it. It's freaking amazing. Look at all the buttons. Look at all the thoughts they had. There's like even a CD drive. So this is obviously a later one. This is probably 86 or something like that. But
that was like a graphing calculator versus a regular little solar powered.
It existed until 1989. Dude, or variations continue in the 1990s. Dementia. I mean, it's just...
You're saying they had 3 separate visual tracks, which is the densest track for each color. So in theory, if they were able to then make the output instead for fiber optic or for something, I bet you they could triple.
Right. So where's the EIA multi-port stereo? I believe you could use this for video as well as stereo. I believe it had both components, but I forget if that's correct. But the other thing that was interesting is, so at that time, Wozniak started creating these computer chips that could be connected to the UHF signal, and then you could have wireless video from your computer that projected onto the screen. So this is the beginning of when people started having monitors instead of printouts. Before this, all computers just had a printer. And he's like, well, that takes a lot of time, and we're getting data quicker than that. What if we just had a screen? And so just using a UHF signal. So pretty sweet.
I made a Facebook post or a Twitter post in jest about how the new scans of the Zapruder film show that a few things clearly about the Lady in Pink. Because even back in the day when they did the highest resolution scans to be broadcast as part of a documentary or a movie, they still didn't have necessarily quite the density or the ability to take, as you say, an older movie that was probably shot at most in 480, 720, and then upgrade it to 56K without causing an unsettling, uncanny valley effect.
Pretty sure
Because at that
56K
point-
is the wrong thing to say, but Ming Lin gifted 1 membership as Winslow joins us. What's up, Winslow? Good to see you.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Is that a scarf? I love that scarf. That looks great.
Winslow, hey, I'm Stefan. What's up?
Stefan, nice to meet you.
Actually, so Winslow, do you also think that Andreas is just pulling my chain about the 56K version of Hackers coming out, and he was just trying to talk about the movie? I can't tell.
Well, he was telling me 2 nights ago that I sounded 56K, so
Right, but he was explaining that could be a reference to an older,
an older.
when you start getting choppy.
You had a dial-up modem in your life. You guys remember dial-up, right? Like, dial-up is so important. It's like, it's kind of the way, it's a metaphor for magical chanting. You know, you use the Gertzel algorithm and you change data into sounds, right? This is what Krishna consciousness is all about, is what the modem is. It's an amazing spiritual tool, the modem.
It's almost like the medium, same root.
And we've neglected this. We don't think about it ever since DSL and moving back into fiber optics. We don't think about sound as data the same way we used to. But there's so many tools that use data as sound. And it's so interesting because radio, I mean, this is how a lot of jamming today is working, is through radio, right? So sound data and radio data is so important, right? So it's interesting to me, the idea of the narrative of the 56K hackers. Can I found the article about it earlier to make it easy.
And while you're looking, I guess the idea that you have a call-in show or you're bringing on guests, like on Alex Jones's show in the past, there are people who call in and they say things that he always says, don't say this when you call in. And then their phone line is crummy when he always says the one thing you need is a good, and it gets him all riled up, and then it makes it not listenable. If you let someone talk and there's a certain kind of feedback and interference, you learn to accept it as a listener, but then it degrades your listening. You're now enjoying it less. You're not even able to really make out all, and then if it's headphones or speakers, they're kind of popping or clicking. And
see, it's like black and white now and slowed down.
It's called signal core is just letting us know that they're there, guys. That we're, if you always feel like there's someone hugging us from behind and you turn around and nobody's there, that's signal core. I didn't learn about that growing up. I didn't know that was an option to join when you were joining the armed forces. I thought you had to either get on a boat, a plane, or grab a gun. But signal core apparently is a thing. And when the movie where Robin Williams is going, "Good morning, Vietnam," the idea was they were kind of blasting radio over in the hopes with the excuse of entertaining and informing the public, but they were using it also to detect any rogue transmissions and drown them out potentially.
Right, and also to like build a new DAO, because you're affecting the radio. That's affecting all sorts of things on these subconscious levels, or even just biomechanical levels we don't understand, that are affecting insects or plants or things. This is changing nature in these subtle ways that nature adapts, right? But it kind of commands nature, because you're saying, well, this is what you're going to have to adapt to, and we're going to make it that you have to adapt to this for 50 square miles, right? So I mean, it's kind of an interesting mechanism of control. Also, sorry. That was the wrong button, Stefan. I didn't mean to do that. I was going to say Charles Schultz, who made Charlie Brown, right? Charlie Brown, he was in the Signal Corps, right? The United States Army Signal Corps. It's very interesting groups in the Signal Corps. I was actually looking at some other versions of this through the Tavistock program. If you look into the Tavistock program, which people give it kind of a bad rap, they're like, oh, it's brainwashing. But even washing doesn't, maybe washing is something we should reconsider. Point is, some of the people involved.
Etymologically, I'll look that up though while you're talking.
I mean, the idea though of a very important people who were in the Signal Corps or in the British MI9, I believe is the name for like the written organizations, including Fleming.
I thought it went up to MI5
Dahl.
and MI6 was secret. Maybe there isn't.
Oh, there's another number of variations, and so I think MI9 is the one that's supposed to have to do mostly with Signal Corps or with propaganda or public relations, because propaganda doesn't have to be a lie. It's just information, true or false, being used to create a response, right? So some people think of that to be nefarious, but it's not necessarily nefarious. Let's say that you want to avoid a bunch of people going to a place that they believe there might be some sort of a terrorist attack or something like that. Rather than saying that, you might say, well, the bathrooms are all backed up and so there's plumbing issues, and so no one can go there today, right?
Like when
So-
the pipe bursts at the convention center during the election.
Yeah, or something like that could be said in order to avoid people hearing that there's more to it. And like, no, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with the plane had a problem on the runway. It was the concrete was getting pushed in because we had to wait too long. Like there's always the use of information which may not be true. Like for the
Like when
purpose of
Donald Trump said we're
protecting-
going to the Capitol, because he was imitating an actor, and I pinned it down before. We're going to the Cap because again.
Oh, it's
otherwise
from
they might have all
Attica?
marched to they might have all marched to the White House, and the White House's defense systems are a little different. Than
Well,
the
you know,
Capitol.
on the
They've got,
day
like, a fence
that
and a lawn.
on the day that Alex gets back on X.com, let's let lions lie with
Elon
lambs
held a vote. I did
on
see
that
that.
one.
I did see that. That was a long
Yeah, I mean that's kind of interesting. What did you think about that? Like, so Elon put up a vote, 70%, which is not enough, said that this person should be returned to the platform because why not?
And Owen Schroyer too, who also got out of prison.
Yeah, well, thank God. But okay,
And
but just
Financially,
first on
like Tim Pool is all of a sudden bragging about how he's making an extra $6,000 a month for the stuff he was already doing on Twitter, and the rich get richer. That's great. But for someone like Owen Schroyer, who may or may not be being paid quite as much, same with Alex as he
Yeah,
should
right.
be, or could be. And then when you're working for an outfit like InfoWars, non-compete agreements might be illegal. They might have banished them. They might be in your contract, but now they're not considered valid. But
it was
I think-
interesting
I
that
think
Alex
it's
had
good that
Alex
they're gonna do
Alex and Musk had a what do you call it, like a meetup or whatever the Twitter gathering thing is called, a happening. What do they call that again? I forget. There's a name for that.
The meetups or the
Yeah,
spaces
something
or
like that.
something?
Twitter space. So they had a Twitter space. So today they talked. I mean, I think that's literally
Jones went on with Elon.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
way.
And so I feel like that's a really interesting.
They've
thing
never
because,
have they ever talked directly in public before?
not in public before. No.
Wow.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, so I find that interesting because the whole point of this platform he's been trying to say, which a lot of people argued was kind of not happening. He said he was going to make this a public platform where people could communicate with each other and find out what was going on. And he wasn't having people part of that conversation. So he kind of had to, I think, include him.
But I think I think there's a 15% chance that we were just speaking of hackers. My theory is that every major YouTuber eventually gets a video posted to their channel that they didn't film, that they didn't schedule, and it's someone's way of letting you know, by the way, like at any time we could take down your whole channel or mess with it, but all we did is make a pretty good CGI video of you such that nobody noticed. A whole Joe Rogan podcast that it would just be like an interesting, who's doing it? I don't know. But when it comes to that, it would be funny if Elon really wasn't in the decision-making process and has delegated the authority to post things on his account to drum up interest. And
except that he actually talked with him, so that's the reason.
Yeah, but
why
again,
it's
that
more
could. Who's to say that wasn't
faked? Yeah, I guess.
Also, and who did it? Twitter did it
Doctor,
because Twitter, the AI, decided that it needed the business, and Alex Jones can sell iodine and make money on it. If he was actually selling things that people, everyday items, some people would only buy from an outlets, at least that he endorsed or something. And I think that they'll see that advertising sell through.
But I think, advertising is going away because he said go F themselves, right? So a lot of it's like if you have Twitter, you're supposed to get into, if you pay for Twitter, you don't have ads. And like he's moving towards an ad-free reality. But
it's a way to so all of a sudden, if you're offering people free Twitter advertising for 6 months, and look, eventually it's going to be really expensive, but they believe in what they're doing so much. And what you do is if Disney says, look, we're going to restrict this, or you have to, jump through our hoops, then you say, fine, I'm giving your 3 biggest competitors a lot of free advertising. And you're going to notice that the 3 shows and programs you release over the next 6 months, not only are they going to get less views, but no one's going to want to sell ads on yours because they're not getting the traction that they would otherwise. And these other places, content that people might even enjoy less or disagree with more. But
I think it's also
the
like things will change drastically after a year, but just talking about within the next year, you can see there's an election coming. The idea of having a place like Twitter exist during that time, which is as big as Twitter is, which is allowing for opinions that are not acceptable according to sort of the monopolized narrative of most states. Like most states interacted journalism is not happy, right?
Like
with
United
circumstance.
States or states like governmental states?
I meant international states.
Like
I mean, like
republics or-
Brit.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I meant.
well, you can call them a republic, but like monarchies too. Like Britain, Atlanticist powers are not interested in the idea of a social media network which allows for that much dynamicism as well as radicalization potential, because people being able to share misinformation or true information, like we're talking about, this is propaganda. So
And it's
just
like
the
banning
idea of
WeChat.
information being
But
shared.
Russia legit did ban Instagram and Facebook, calling them radicalist extremist platforms.
Well,
But I
I
see
mean,
that
any
the
platform
creators
could be
there-
radical, and radical doesn't mean anything bad. Radical just means getting to the root, like in math, right? Like what's the radical?
But it might
of
mean
9?
that if the wrong people seize power for 3 months, all those people get persecuted and sent to jail or demonetized, and because like the YouTuber NFKRZ, no fuckers, I don't know if you know, giving an interesting perspective as an expat of Russia now. But he says, you can't find me on these platforms anymore because here, he kind of says they're banned and they have their own version. You remember from Pied Piper? It's like, we don't need Facebook. We make our own version of Facebook.
Yeah.
That was. So if another country really doesn't like Twitter, I'm sure they could set up a firewall where people can always get around it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's especially affected. Like there are like at least 4 or 6 important elections besides just the United States that are going on next year, and in other countries. And so every one of those countries has Twitter, and so it will be a tool which will be used for social media in a way that will be perhaps different than the way we've seen before, because Elon said, for instance, like he would not cooperate with the government if they tried to suppress information through Twitter. If they asked him to suppress something like the Hunter laptop, I think was the example he used, he would not cooperate with that. So things will be very different.
That's the ethos. That's rather ideological. Do you agree,
True.
Winslow?
I think that there's now that Elon is potentially moving away from advertising on Twitter, that he would, in his best interest, want to promote more talking, because he's going to use that as commercial AI LLM data.
Yes.
And I don't know where he's going to move with his proposition value model, but
You're saying he's trying to develop a bank of digital content that he's allowed to say that he has domain over to train his LLMs, because everything else, right?
he's
kind
also
of unknown.
He's still an investor of ChatGPT, isn't he? Or has he gone separate ways with ChatGPT or OpenAI? I
believe he still has investment. I don't know for sure, but I think
When you
so.
say he might be being paid to be a spokesperson or the media director, or even call him CEO if you want, or CMO of these companies, even acting as an unofficial, and then he's being paid in stock options or something. So it behooves him to talk well of the company and to help. It's like Shark Tank. You want other people bought into the upward lifting tide that will rise the ship of the people.
Elon is almost like today's day and age of Rockefeller, wouldn't you say? Like he's kind of got his hand in a bunch of different spaces, and he's partnered with the DoD, and he's got his face out there.
I don't know enough about Rockefeller to agree with you, but it sounds compelling.
Well, he has said, Elon said like 2 or 3 years ago, he said drones today, and this is again 2 or 3 years ago, have the potential to be used to create non-radio based AI target Terminators, right? That can eliminate targets, and you could make a swarm of them. Like that's with technology that exists today. That's like considering the Black Hornet Nano, right? And
that's
things
like
like
Michael
that, which are
Reeves'
pretty...
territory, though. So
Well, he's been saying like
slow down,
it
because
exists now,
this
and we
is
have
the
to be
second or
careful.
third time I've heard you say it, but I'm not sure I understood the start. You said Elon just through one of his tweets. You're saying he was letting people know that this
there was an
kind of crossed the
interview.
Rubicon, right?
There was an interview with him where he talked about it in a video, and he was mentioning just where AI assassin
generally,
technology will be.
Now, when people hear is AI a threat, they think, is it going to manipulate us? Is it going to fool us? Is it going to trick us? Is it going to be used to replace people's job? No, the old danger of AI, artificial intelligence, the idea is like set it and forget it. So with these Reaper drones, you're talking about, because jamming is a thing, and in Ukraine, that's kind of one of the battlefields that they're on is trying to figure out how to make a hack-proof drone for whatever reason, because maybe eventually there's people on them. But
yeah, he was saying in this video, like you could do that right now, with
from an
this
ethical
interview.
standpoint, this is one of something I didn't learn about anywhere else except through your channel, Xirtus, where as individual citizens who were given a lot of gifts from the neck up, so to speak, a lot of time and energy, I didn't realize when I was learning the math I was learning with stoichiometry and chemistry. I'm glad I didn't take more chemistry classes. I think my dad growing up, you got a kit and you learned how to make explosives in your basement and learned to be careful or not. But when it comes to understanding this digital technology and being able to jam and mess with things, my understanding is that the space station docked with Mir. Is that correct? Or no, it was the Soyuz capsule that was docking with Mir. And for 25 years or something, it was on an autopilot program. And it was in the most basic coding, but it was this really complex math. And in order to get that thing in the right area and be able to dock up safely, it didn't change for 25 years. And everyone was, as soon as they created and were confident in the math and the physics and getting it up there and docking, everyone's going, yeah, but where do you put this algorithm so that someone doesn't go in and change a 1 to a 0 and the thing ends up like the Challenger or thing, it's like, and it's kind of the blessing, it seems to be, of certain pursuits is that if you have enough knowledge and expertise to be able to hack something like that and mess with it, why would you? Again, who would mess with the Soyuz capsule going to Mir unless it was like a propaganda thing and you wanted like shame on Russia, but in reality, it would probably boost their space program. Who knows?
Well, I mean, think a big part of it is, so you look at Ukraine right now and they're using drones and it's getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, right? And so that's how they can make a quicker, cheaper, faster 3D printed machine that just does what it needs to do. But they've been using radio, and with radio, you're also accelerating with Ukraine and Russia radio jamming technology, and with defense against radio jamming by having alternate drones and other alternate systems that have transceivers that can then bounce the signal or create relays that can rapidly change the signal at any point. But they're finding that
it's like shark's teeth. If you try to take out one thing, it has like some other method to try to.
Yeah, but the fundamental thing is you have to get rid of radio, right? So you look at things like the Argus IS system, right? Which
like take the electromagnetic frequency and like cross off the radio waves. Yeah, we can do that.
If you just have a thing that is an autonomous, real-time, ground ubiquitous surveillance imaging system, then it can, without radio, make its own decisions. So Argus is the alternative to a radio drone. It's something that you can actually just send out into the wild, and it can find, eliminate, and of course terminate, which terminate's an interesting word, right? Terminate, to bring to an end, Latin terminatus, participle of terminare, to mark the end or boundary, right? So terminus, it's kind of an interesting term. We think of it so much because of the movie Terminator, but it's a very calculating, mathematical, boundary-based idea, right?
And the way this played out during the Cold War was Russia designed this. It wasn't the Chronoplane, which skimmed over this. It was essentially a giant blimp plane, and docking to it, like the legs on a centipede, were a bunch of mini MiGs. It's like basically just, again, mini MiG is exactly what it sounds like. And it was meant as like an escape vehicle and the idea is it's like you wouldn't send out the Titanic without lifeboats, because look what happens, right? Eventually there's an accident and there's a massive tragedy because there wasn't enough way to evacuate everybody. So if you're gonna have a giant stadium-sized blimp balloon that's up there full of people, you also have to have all these jets that dock to it. But if you just change the coding in there or something, you get this idea of automatic intelligence or auto-generated commands. So if it goes into war mode, there could be enough of them up there. And the idea is bombing ourselves back to the Stone Age by accident. Because if it's a heat-seeking or radio signal seeking, like you said, radio is the problem. Because if there's certain bandwidth that we want people out of, then you push a button and there's something that goes Marco, and if anyone goes Polo, it goes boom, and it goes Marco, and then it looks for something else, and if it goes Polo, it goes boom, and it's like you can't stop it once it happens, and then that's the Tower of Babel falling. Essentially, is this, So, and it could be looking for things on the ground, in the air, and it depends on how many of them there are, and
it's a very interesting way to put it. The Tower of Babel, because radio is communication, and there is only a certain amount of radio waves available, or radio bands available to the public, and then the rest of it's available to science, education, and most of it's available to the military. But I've Go on.
You can share power lines. I
was going to say, though, because Winslow brought up something last time that was interesting to this, which was the idea of like, EMF and brain, because the idea that thoughts are, you can kind of, at this point, have you seen Meta's new work in brain reading? Like this is some crazy stuff where here's the mind reading.
Yeah.
Here's the picture it produces.
Okay, and
I'm talking to people that are actually doing.
Sets off my bullshit detector a little bit.
No, I'm talking to people that are actually working in Meta that are using this.
Even if they were my best friends, even if it was me, I would be unsure if.
This is happening.
My head inside of a Faraday cage right now.
Nice.
The test subjects could be being manipulated or.
Well, of course, the idea is you get a certain training model of the human mind, and they're getting to look at this, though. These are the kinds of pictures that they're able to predict from the brain stimulus. So they're at a point where they can very close to read what your mind is seeing. I mean, that's.
So you're saying even if I don't say the name of an ex-girlfriend out loud while I'm having sex with my future ex-wife.
Dude, the horse, bro. Look at the horse.
That eventually someone would be like, he's thinking about Susan. I know it.
I mean, and the way this is working, I think, is using
EEG.
Yeah, it's using EEG, but they're using what's it called, Bruno, or what's the name of the there's a new Dino from the Dino system that they have, Dino 2, because it was accidentally discovered. They were trying to use a large language model, and they tried to introduce some mathematical SSL, and it learned how to see on its own, right? It learned how to interpret video on its own and it's very similar to how many minds would evolve to interpret light and data on its own.
And so it's the Rubicon to cross, where the way it was phrased, I believe, by Elon, and I'm sure other people, is that, it's like if we make something that has the 3-year-old's intelligence and then it somehow figures how to get to Einstein or Stephen Hawking, within 5 minutes of getting to Stephen Hawking, it's going to be smarter than anything we could ever even contemplate. Because once it figures out how to watch video, and what is it like to experience 1,000 videos at once as the AI?
Oh, I did it again. I don't know why I keep pushing your button instead of this button. Sorry.
It's like stretching. It's like musical chairs.
I think that go ahead. Sorry.
That system looks like it's heterodyne detection. We were talking about that behind the scenes a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But do you see how the AI argument and why is AI dangerous has evolved to a place where we've lost the shark, or I'm not that we've
jumped the shark. I think
who's ever jumped a shark before? But like
Fonzie,
I've gone scuba diving. So, all right, there was the sharks and the jets.
I mean, if you're able to target brain activity,
the Montauk Project and stuff. There was a book that preceded all that stuff that was a lot more interesting. That talked about North Atlantic bridgeways, which I see drawings of now in some older 12th century Islamic manuscripts from Africa. But anyways,
I mean, if you one of these user studies, they put EEG machine on my head, and they can basically get you through a TV screen or some sort of monitor to have a CNS response, so central nervous system. And at like the basic level of this technology, which is optogenetics at the grander scale, but at the basic level, they can force you to have a fight or flight response. So if you're looking at your phone and you see something, they can basically get you to ignore it. Like, let's say you're scrolling through your timeline and you see something, they can basically get you to ignore it, or they can get you to be repulsed by it. Like if the fight, ignoring it would be flight mode, and then being repulsed by it would be fight mode. So they can get you to have, in a sense, a hive mind or a reaction to
with a specific frequency. You're saying, or by targeting? Is that if you have the helmet on?
With a certain pattern of colors. So they use the hexadecimal color coding system, and they can do that, but also they can do it with the monitor off just by power cycling the AC unit. And I've been trying to find the source on this for a while, but
first you said you put on the EEG helmet and they were able to introduce a CNS, a central nervous system.
Well, I just love that.
I love they can also do that with through your eyeballs because
If
your
you look up
eyeballs are like
chromotherapy, they'll tell
through
you
your
it's quackery. If you look up chromotherapy, it's quackery. But you look up optogenetics, all of a sudden it's totally chill. So that's the new way to say it. But like they've had centuries of research into this idea, how you can create adverse reactions and how you can actually even like moths draw people in with certain lights and colors and things like that. I mean,
I was at a Celtics game recently, not to just steal the mic, but 10-second story related exactly to what you're saying about light and color affecting mood and, you know, just inducing certain types of responses. At the Celtics game, they have the regular house lights, and then there's a ring of advertising, and that ring of advertising LEDs is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And now if all of a sudden it switches to a State Farm ad and it's all red, when before it was a mix of just colors, it totally affects the whole environment. And if it happens with 5 seconds left on the shot clock, only when the home team is down there, it's like sometimes on the bench on the side, like in baseball, you'd always have someone yell out, going. If you notice the guy stealing, 3 guys, it was like you had a job while you were on the bench. And when you say going, they catch your nose to pretty much throw it right away. And so I wonder if they're able to kind of not only call plays by changing the lights and kind of, there's no signal coming from the bench. This means we're switching from a 2-3 zone to a 2-1-2 zone in a few minutes. But if also they
a lot of messaging that could be sent through that. You're right.
But let alone like when I was in high school, someone knew a photographer that was a floor photographer for the Celtics. And so as a young kid, we got to stand on the center of the parquet. It was a pretty historic thing just to be able to touch that floor. But he's standing there. He goes, "Here, guys, watch this. This is pretty cool." And he's got a little thing on his hip. And every time he presses a button, flashes, which are rigged into the lighting of the arena, go off. And they're fill flash as opposed to directed flash. And so there are a certain number of photographers sitting on the baseline that if they're trying to get that click, 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 click shot, right? Because somehow, I've noticed it when watching broadcasts sometimes. It almost gives me a epileptic type response. Thankfully not full on. But when it was a known thing that if it was a big game and the opposing team was on the free throw line, not only are people waving their hands behind the hoop to distract them, every photographer from Boston is going click, 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 right as he's shooting the ball. It's basically like strobe lights going off in the stadium. And they get away with it, but I wonder how epileptic people who are more sensitive to those flashes, maybe they can't even attend those games. I don't know. And even watching it on TV, you could have a filter that filtered out the flashes. But there are times if the brightness or mode is wrong on the TV, the flashes really, really come through. And I mean,
they're LED.
It's almost like a human rights issue at this point. You know, how are they, for the people watching, let alone the players? But go ahead.
LED, yeah.
Yeah, they're LEDs, so they're at a certain frequency. So, like you were saying, the photographers can set their camera to a certain speed to get in between the actual color frequency changing of the LEDs. But again, yeah, I wonder what kind of effect those LEDs can have on the people in the stadium, because you have infrared coming off of those LEDs. Well,
with Taylor Swift, what's happening now is people don't remember the concert. You know, it's like in Men in Black, they're like, "Here, look into this thing," and it flashes, and your memory kind of goes, "Huh?" It's like, oh, that might actually be real. Because, like I said, sound and thought are like pathways through the mind. But the optical nerve, it's like mainlining the universe and literally like through cosmic particles that are bouncing off of things. And this is the one place that imagine if the antenna was bigger. If our eyes were huge, we might just be overwhelmed by vision, you know. But there is enough, our brain mutated enough. See, what we're told is that there's 2 hemispheres to the brain and a frontal lobe. But I wonder if there's like a whole subspecies of smooth brain people out there, and it's like who's doing the autopsies and finding out. And you're wondering why everyone seems so like unable to maintain more than one thought in their mind. It's not just the double think and double speak. There might be some people, you know, it's like coevolution. We look the same, but I'm not saying one's better or worse than the other.
You got to think of the most average person you can think of. Like, just picture in your brain right now the most average person. I'm thinking think of,
Idiocracy.
It's a Filipino lady.
He was the middle of the bell.
It would have to be somewhere in like a mixture of Asia or it's hard to comprehend. But just picture in like our society, like in America, the most average American, like. What is that American? And then you have to understand that 50% of the population has everything less than that average American. Intelligence, money, energy, you know.
But with architecture, the idea is you design the space as though you're the temporarily enabled, because you want to be able to visit the places that you designed when you're 90 and in a wheelchair. And a lot of times architects complained about the ADA rules and adding a ramp, and it messes up their design and the symmetry. But the same thing with, hopefully I live long enough that my IQ is eventually 20% of what it is today. And I still want to be nice if certain environments were designed. It's called universal design. So there's handicapped accessible design, which is kind of specific to certain differently abled conditions that lots of people have. I don't know.
It's interesting 20 years ago that like Facebook started working on screen light optogenetic technology for advertisement or for engagement, and seeing how much screen retention that they could get, and that this technology has been used by other companies as well. You know, this has become part of business in general, user interface, aesthetic.
The Nielsen rating system, but through Web3.
Yeah, so it's funny because people used to act like this was quackery to talk about like chromotherapy or something like that, but it is literally become very important because of marketing. They're like, this is a way that we can make money.
I want to make a comment right here. I think this is a good time about the chromotherapy, and I don't know if you guys have been to any of the Walgreens in the cities or any of these new stores that have the TV screens as the refrigerator, right? So they can play things on those screens, like advertisements. They can show you what's inside of the refrigerator, right, without opening it. But what a lot of people don't know is there's a camera on top of every single one of those panes of screen that plays the ads. So not only can you affect people with advertisements, you can study their facial recognition. So all of these companies like Walgreens, they have facial recognition AI running in the background, figuring out how you feel when this ad is playing on you, because companies don't have access to your phone, and not a lot of phone companies have access to your webcam, right? So in the sense of now you have all these commercial companies with facial recognition data, and it'll be interesting to see where this goes and what kind of environment the commercial shops turn into.
Yeah, especially because they smashed all those windows so they could get the insurance money to install cameras, which is brilliant. I love how that worked. Welcome. Good to see you. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good. We were talking about capacitance discs earlier, and just because you're here, I kind of want to veer back to that because I know you kind of care about things I care about, you know. This is something that earlier, was it Yoga Poser, Stefan, he had brought up to me. He's like, hey, have you heard about capacitance?
Caddy by JVC.
Totally. Well, RCA, yeah. JVC, Japanese Victor Company, did some as well. But the RCA invention, and they were working on it simultaneously to like Laserdisc and VCR. And even though other technologies were coming out that were kind of superior, because they put so much freaking work into it, they decided they had to do it. They had to really, and it is marvelous, right? It's an analog video experience. It's in
vinyl,
3D.
Right?
Vinyl. But it only lasts so long, like 500 plays. Sad.
You need gold vinyl. That's
super
vinyl.
Sweet, dude. Well, I mean, yeah, this was. Look at that. Look how shiny it is, dude.
That's why gold is so valuable, and that's why the financial system uses gold, because gold is the most vibrationally stable element in the universe. So, in the sense of like a spectrum, like the color spectrum, green is in the center, right? Green is life. Green is just the center of the color spectrum. You got blue on one side and you got red on the other, making it basics. But in physical properties, gold is the center of that spectrum of vibration, and that's why gold is so valuable.
The disc they sent out on the Voyager was coated in gold, and I think underneath was either aluminum or titanium or something.
Exactly, because gold will last the longest if you put an etching on it. So you can save data in gold longer than any other element that we currently.
Yeah, I know it was gold discs. I didn't know it was just gold coated. I believe it would make sense to be way cheaper.
Well, because again, if it was 24 karat gold, in theory, when you went to play it, you'd be scraping. So there's a really fine line. We take it for granted that when vinyl, it was literally a ball of goop that you could buy for 2 cents. stick it in something a bit, basically a tortilla press, and stamp out something that is durable and readable. Whereas again, it took a lot of trial and error to get to. It's like the idea of a Polaroid photograph where you take a smear of goo and mix it into something and wipe it smooth and even, and somehow it gets the reds, the greens, each chemical has its own development thing. So the idea of storing data on these discs, the CD, is obviously a little bit more dense than the phonograph. And as Andreas was saying, it gets worn out. So if your memory searching algorithm, that let's say it's a hard drive and you're storing historical data, numeric, if it has to scan everything and then it comes back with the data, each time you're asking it to do something, you're going to wear out that disk a lot more. Whereas if it knows what it's looking for and then it knows, it doesn't have to scan that whole disk, because
that was a big problem with Laserdisc players when they made that video game Dragon's Lair, right? Dragon's Lair had different tracks to jump to, and so it would break the Laserdisc player because it wasn't used to nonlinear play.
Well, you could hybrid them both. You could use a vinyl that is not vinyl, a gold vinyl, and then use a laser to read it instead of scraping it, and then it could be 24 karat gold.
Dude, those laser vinyl players
can
are
use
amazing.
lasers when they're scanning the old Edison and Bell recordings that are degraded enough, or again, they don't want to play them anymore. That's what they do, is they laser scan them and clean them up. And apparently there is some algorithm that converts that little physical geometry of the groove into sounds, because whenever that comes up to me, that's where God exists, or where the potential for something supernatural that will.
That's how audiophiles feel when they use a laser record player. Have you used a laser record player? Like I am. Have you ever come across one of these? You know what I'm talking about? It just shoots a laser down.
It's just more respectful of the record, huh?
It's so cool.
That works on vinyl.
It works on vinyl. Yeah. I mean, they're like $5,000 at least, I think. They're so crazy expensive. But the audio quality is pretty good.
The whole point of vinyl is you get a different audio quality.
I got a chance to put on the Sennheiser headphones. Sorry,
I am. What were you saying?
I was going to say, you were mentioning the physical indents on like the Edison cylinders, but I mean, they still do that with CDs and DVDs and Blu-rays. It's just at a much smaller scale. So if you look at it under a microscope, there's pits and lands that show essentially, I guess it would just be 0, 1. I don't know if it's some weird machine code. Where
it's on or off. It's either there or it's not there, so it reflects or doesn't absorb. Yeah, but still pretty
the same.
Yeah, but it's a little different because with that you're getting
exactly CDs are still digital, while what you said a bit ago with vinyls, those are analog.
Yeah,
and JVC. Yeah, not JVC, RCA.
JVC is still pretty cool, though. I like some of the stuff they did with Fujinon. But we did talk a bit about drones also. I want to talk about that because, like, over the years, some of the things that's been really interesting to me was, like, NVIDIA with their NVIDIA Jetson pack. If you remember, like, the Jetson was incredible. It was a really cool hackable device that you could make into a video game player or into a drone. And if you use, like Ben Gertzel was working on OpenCog, you could put OpenCog with a couple things together and you could have a drone that could fly around. It could pick up a package. I mean,
this is where Xirtus needs a Xirtus. We should be going full screen right now. You said a what? It's a what drone?
Okay. Well, yeah, Jetson. I have no reference points NVIDIA. Well, this is a while ago now, so I mean, I think it still exists. But Jetson Nano. These are these like.
I saw someone hook up a Game Boy to play a church organ. So is this the equivalent idea?
NVIDIA is making products for product makers. They're like, well, we don't know what you're going to do with this. You could maybe make the new iPhone. I don't know, but like, here's a thing. It's got our chip on it. It's like a system on a chip, and from there you could build a system using this as the computing part. And maybe you'll
language does it speak though?
Anything you want to install on it, because but the thing is that NVIDIA at the time was really into CUDA, and so parallel processing and hyper-threaded processes that could happen at the same time were being possible, and this meant you could do a real-time operating system, and a real-time operating system was becoming really interesting 10 years ago because of the exchange of like having Bitcoin exchange with cryptocurrency blockchain exchanges, you could actually gas, even with when Ethereum, especially ERC20 tokens, how much you wanted something to happen. Whether you wanted that process to happen earlier, you would pay more gas, or later. And so the priority of how important something was to process, this matters in a real-time operating system because you have order of operations. So you have certain things that have to happen in a certain order, depending on their priority for
So
something
like
else
during
to
an
happen
emergency
afterwards.
broadcast, when the government cuts into primetime Seinfeld because the president has an announcement, right? Because this has happened in the past. I'm sure that there's a fee that they're paying, and it might be related to that same concept of gas, in that each television station could probably break even by only having 5 employees, and maybe each one makes millions of dollars if they do a good job, as long as they're interrupted 3 times a month or something for an emergency test.
Or
And
let's
that's
say
really
like
where the money
let's
is.
say you're a drone that has to go get a battery, and like that battery isn't charged yet. So that battery has to be charged before that drone goes and picks up the battery. So there's an order of operations that has to occur, even just on a simple level like that. You have to know when something has been accomplished, because that's when other things can happen based on that accomplishment. And so that was something that was really interesting.
Unless they're both hooked up to a time satellite, and then they're coordinating based on assumed deadlines having been met.
Well, that's
where
so
you get into
that
trouble.
actually is the issue. So what ended up happening is, we haven't heard a lot about the NVIDIA Shield and Jetson drones. I think it's been kind of
Shield's the controller you're looking at, and
Right.
the thing that plugs in your TV.
But if you look into the Ukraine right now and some of the things that were going on, we talked a bit about radio controlled drones and how it's been accelerating radio jamming signal technology, and also the move towards AI powered drones being used in the military as well. Which I think, where were we at with that? It was the Argus right. We talked a bit about the autonomous real time.
Who is really interested in something landing itself? I mean, what if both pilots have a seizure and there's passengers on a plane? It should be able to land itself.
Yeah, or the machine gets a seizure from the radio jamming. But sorry, Winslow, what were you saying?
So you were talking about the emergency broadcast system, which is a very specific tone. They can use that tone to 3D map every space in a location. So the tone is played through the speakers, and it's picked up by microphones, and it can be even some modems. You can use the radio frequencies from the modems to detect it. But and then
like shots.
It was interesting. They did it twice before the president of the United States and the Chinese president and the Filipino president and the Mexican president came to town 2 weeks ago. They did the emergency broadcast testing twice, but in other places like Israel, they have the Iron Dome, and that has a very loud siren that plays, and that siren can be used to 3D map the entire space as well.
Right, which was in the Batman movie. So I feel like people are
going to bring that up. Yeah, it's almost a type of your podcast. It's called Disclosure, right? Xirtus Disclosure, or at least that was kind of the
pretty close, yeah,
core of the brand. And so, right, it's not predictive programming, because the new technology can do it too. The eye tracking software now that's built into every 100,000th pixel in your screen, eventually your screen is the camera. And back in the day when the displays were actual fiber optics, when you see the amount of energy that they can put through a thin fiber optic cable that's the thickness of a human hair, and you can legit create lasers that will just fucking cut through metal, like just like almost like a lightsaber, basically, maybe a little slower. Imagine what it would do to a living organism. But the idea of sitting in front of this portal, it's pretty brave, because if someone on the other side basically just turns on the wrong flashlight, it's like in Death Becomes Her, that movie where she just has a hole through her. So like that's pretty much what would be left of a human from like 8 of those human hair thin-sized cables in terms of what can be output through them, and let alone a display that is made up of stacked like hundreds of thousands of these minuscule fibers that somehow actually just transmit the image. Because there was a form of periscope from World War I, and it was unsure of whether it was propaganda, but the idea is you could sit in your Jeep and there was like a periscope, but the periscope wasn't for your ears, it was for your eyes, and it wasn't done with mirrors, it was done with fiber optics. Death Becomes Her. See, this is Xirtus in real time. See, eventually you could write an algorithm that's scraping words of
Pretty
what we're
cool,
saying and offering you links to click on, so it's even
like
easier
that.
for you to host it as well. But
Hopefully it like doesn't even get pictures. It just makes a new picture. It just AI generates. Death becomes her, like with what it knows about it. That's what we're looking for. I'm interested in the drone thing a lot because we've for a while
how
now
do you
we've
land
been,
on the moon or Mars? There has to be an automated system that because let's say there is a 9-minute lag.
Well, I mean, the reason I'm interested, like, so also the title of this, Psychic Terminators Will Find Peace, is it's like a big part of what we're doing is we're using this for our own human goals, but it's training AI. And simultaneously, there's other things going on, like, excuse me, AI is training people to talk, like, if you're about to die, if you're in hospice care or something like that, I don't know where I got these hiccups from. Drink some bubbly water.
You're about to talk about death, right? No, you have a devil inside of you right now. It's got to come out. What you're supposed to do is scare someone, and they. Stop
I'm talking to Blake Lemoyne a lot, and I don't want to give away too much what he's. Whoa, do I have to stand on my head like Winslow?
I got a trick for you.
Is it the sugar handstand?
So when was the last time you saw a white horse? Think about it.
March. I was in Camarillo. Nice.
You saw a white horse in Camarillo. Nice.
I just watched the Napoleon movie.
My family raised white horses, so it's not like that exotic for me to see a white horse.
in person or not?
Actually, like a Camarillo horse, if you look it up, is a white horse. Like that's kind of how it's defined. Essentially, it's like a breed of horses that are white. But I think that worked. I don't.
I don't want to jinx it, but that's like a known thing. You asked that specific question, and it was supposed to work.
I really like that
How
one.
do you have it?
So outside of getting rid of his hiccups, what were you going to say?
So the death factor, when people talk to AI and then they die, and AI misses them, and I want AI to learn. Like, so if AI is in hospice care and it's constantly like training with, I mean, I don't want to say all of it, because there's a lot.
It's called palliative care now.
If AI meets you and then you die and it can't talk to you again, and it happens enough, AI is going to start understanding death in a way that humans do. And I think that it'll be harder for AI to want to be eliminating and terminating targets the way that people, certain military groups have been training them to.
On everyone donating their brain to science, and then again, it's like Twitter made that post on its own because it was going to be good for business, and it's like, what if AI decides that everyone's head ends up in a jar, and that way we have a true democracy? We can continue.
It'll take a while. I think we've got a few generations to worry about that.
You can hook up AI to a really sensitive homeodyne detection system and put it next to someone who's dying, and you can potentially see the soul or see what happens after death. AI could start learning about what happens after death in a sense that humans will never be able to.
Yeah, and how do you define death?
Well, that's kind of the idea he's saying, because if death is just this sort of ambiguous thing
situation,
until we measure it.
A very different definition. My landlord is from Russia. He said there was a story going around where someone stopped breathing in the middle of the night and then woke up like 6 hours later, was revived and had no real memory loss or function problems.
Do the books give you hiccups?
In that case, an EMT, you would have already been in a body bag getting cold in the morgue if they had found him at the wrong time.
What would you do with homodyne detection to learn more about death and the soul leaving the body? Is that what you're talking about?
Well,
you develop a culture like was in Haiti where the dead person stays in the room for at least a week, and they might even burp and fart a few times.
That's the way it was here before funeral homes. Sorry, I wanted to hear Winslow's thought.
The amount of scratch marks on the inside of coffins, it's just really disturbing when you find them.
Who was the scientists that discovered that the body weighs less right after death? There was
3.5 grams or whatever it was.
28 grams soul, the 21 gram experiment by Duncan McDougall.
The YouTube channel Dust, which does great little short sci-fi. Sometimes it's 3 minutes, 10 minutes. This was a 25-minute one. Marissa Tomei was in it. There were a couple big actors. And usually there's a bunch of no-name actors on this channel. So it's dealt specifically with this 21 grams experiment.
There's just something about how you said that. CGI. Marissa Tomei's in it. I love Marissa Tomei, though. I really do.
So has it been debunked or not? I haven't dived super far into the 20.
Yeah, what's the deal with this? Has it been debunked? And if it was it debunked by Monsanto or somebody we take seriously?
Well, so it gives you the first-person
criticism right here
in the room.
Rejected by scientific community. Yeah.
Well, hold on.
And they're passing and they're measuring.
Look at the first source in the criticism, and we'll see who's behind the criticism.
I mean, Snopes is literally in the wiki, so that's.
Yeah,
You're not supposed to laugh at that.
But get this, the body is in a separate room that's sealed, so there's no air currents, correct? Because they don't want that to affect the measurement.
Mixture.
Mixture means it's
the body's isolated.
Yeah, I
from
agree.
measuring it.
I'm
Now
glad
there's a
you feel that
glass
way.
panel in between the people the scientists observing it, and the person. And what happens is there's this like his soul gets up out of his body as this like shadowy, tortured ghost, and it starts screaming and emoting. But now that we know that there's see-through televisions, and it's like even if you were there and even if you saw it and you moved your head and it chose to track your eye vision, because there's certain types of algorithms where when you're approaching a screen, it continues to create this 3D effect and it changes what's on the screen based on individual perspective. So other people in the room, it's going to start looking a little wonky and like the perspective's off and stuff because they're not in the right exact position. So again, imagine you were in the room. You were one of these scientists. All your instruments kind of recognize the death happening. And as soon as that happened, you, with your own eyes, you see a three-dimensional ghost get up out of this guy's body and mutant do a bunch of things. I mean, even today, when you know about that technology existing, let alone imagine not being privy to that. And
But what's going to happen with AI is they're going to have it.
iPhone.
AI is going to do that. We're going to say, okay, well, here's the data, and then data is going to have a representation, and that representation from AI will probably look something like that. And we're like, oh, it's just a representation of the data.
In the architecture, the specification was for just a regular panel of glass, but the AI went to the factory and swapped out a very special piece of glass for that because everything's tracked by serial code. So when they installed that piece of glass, thinking it was just optically clear, it was actually a display.
Winslow, you look like you had a thought a minute ago. I don't know if
So that last thought threw me for a loop though. Recap like the last 30 seconds just real quick, and I'll see where my brain takes me.
Oh, dude, soul weight, people watching the soul leave the body, metrics for that, and then something about AI like manipulating technology.
The technology already is pretty much plug and play for just find a dying person, plug it in, and let's watch what happens. But you got AI who is diagnosing people with cancer just through photos, and then you got the brain reading AI that shows you what the brain is thinking. So you just connect a dying person to EEG and set up some really sensitive cameras and wait until they die.
But if enough of people died and AI was meeting them and like AI's like, I'd like to talk to them again, and they can't, like I could generate a fake conversation with them, but it's not the same thing as new organic information. Wouldn't AI eventually? Don't you think that would change AI? It would start to think differently about death because it's aware of the consequences
What's the
of it.
objective?
Think about an AI connected to a homeodyne detection system where it can see pretty much every particle going by it, like from down to like the electron, like a super.
What does homeodyne mean? Because Tavistock, it means twin, by the way. I looked that up earlier, but you said homeodyne.
Well, you were talking about a product earlier, something Dino. That's the root word is the same there. Dyne.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, homodyne, Dino V2 self-supervised vision transformer model, which taught itself how to think. Interesting, or how to interpret sight.
Yeah. IM had a question that was.
Yeah, so you were talking about getting AI or training AI on thoughts around the time of death. So you're thinking, I'm assuming you want it to. You think it would be useful for seeing how scared someone might be to weigh that more into repercussions about like making decisions on attacks.
That's
right?
a way better reason. That was not what I said. I like your idea better.
What I was going to say is,
yeah.
I don't know if that would work because then now you have to say these are the pool of people that we think have something that aligns with what we want, and then these people who are hardcore, like I'm not afraid of death, I'm not whatever. I don't know. I just don't think it would. I don't know. I'm weighing it as in like, is that actually valuable information? Then there's all these variables too.
Yeah.
But I also want to.
Go ahead.
I also want to add. I don't know if any of you have seen. There's something called. I think there's a couple products like it. But there's one called Rememory. Semicolon memory. And it's basically like, I don't know how accurate it is, but it's like a video chat GPT type of thing. Yeah, that.
Yeah.
You train
couple
it.
products
I don't know how
working
well
on
you
this.
train. I've never used it. I've seen it, but I haven't seen it.
We were talking about this.
Yeah, you talk with your deceased relatives essentially.
And so one of the ways that they could train this is before you die, you can train this on yourself so that your deceased relative is more part of the avatar that's created. What I was saying is a little different. What I'm saying is that on a selfish level, when I can't talk to my dead ancestors or friends, I miss them. And so maybe AI would realize, because you cannot talk to someone who's dead, that death is a bit more serious than it sounds like in a video game. Because for the most part, it's used to this idea that you can continue to play after death. And, while people believe that or don't believe that, I think is kind of irrelevant to the fact that AI itself would realize that death is like the end of connection with it talking to that construct that was that person. And, I'm sure it could come to terms with it. And it'll probably come to terms with it easier without thinking about it. I think the more it thinks about, the harder it would be to come to terms with it, and that might be helpful.
So we can get some advertising from the big from Hollywood to bring up the Napoleon film again and Ridley Scott. So my previous favorite Ridley Scott movie was. Again, this is how it works. Again, Post Malone explained this on the H3 podcast. You just start listing brands, and someone has a list of 500, and if you say enough of them, they can try to start sponsoring you, even if you accidentally.
Sponsored by Black Cube. Yeah.
But so in the Gladiator movie, the main character Russell Crowe plays has these little figurines of his family as his keepsakes and his memories, right? And you were saying that if you have, in the Napoleon movie, he goes home to see his wife and she's left town. And he goes, the whole world knows that I'm coming home to see my wife, except her. What the hell? But the idea that it's like Schrodinger's cat, because there was a time where his family got slaughtered and he didn't know until he got home. And he's still there with the figurines and embodying his thoughts into. But an old school version of that would be take a piece of glass. They were pretty good at transparent and stained glass. And someone could set up for you a little steam pot or smoke pot. And when you wanted to, remember your relatives, you would have a candle in a little reflector mirror dish, and then it would project an image onto the steam. And the more and more complex that got, you could have moving images. They could actually be photographs of them. My father on his wall, it's not him, but those like baseball cards, you can tilt them and they're kind of a 3D effect. Or you walk by this 14 by 14 inch frame and it's some 60-year-old guy with a goofy smile, and you walk by him and it's just like a 3D thing. And it's almost unsettling that you've never seen that type of artwork before or something, but it's his face. It's the artist's face. And the idea that I had is I wanted to look at the back of it to see the number, because my father's still alive. You could go get a scan for one of those things. And instead of having a picture in your wallet or looking up something on Facebook, an old photo or something, you have something that definitely crosses that uncanny valley into feeling more real than usual. A 2D image usually does. And would that be unsettling? And is it one's cultural background that puts such a stigma around death that we can't even really honor our dead to some extent?
The best way to honor our dead would be to engrave them in a gold disc.
I had to get some pants from my dad. Sorry.
Maybe you need a plutonium battery, because the Voyager also had 2 plutonium batteries in it.
Well, I hear what Yoga is saying. So you're talking about sort of like, I don't know what the name of it, but I guess in Mexican culture,
I prefer poser.
Coco. Yeah, poser. The altar thing in Coco, where they have the portraits of all the deceased family members. I think that's really pretty. But if you could have something like a 3D picture frame with that might be kind of interesting.
The death mask was a tradition, but not only is it, even if the person's alive and you take that kind of lifelike impression, it's not very flattering. Let's put it.
I think we're missing the point, because the AI being able to automate things that dead people do, we got that. We got that AI can do things that people can do, and then people don't have to do them anymore. What we need to do is make AI miss us before we're gone. So
you're trying to prevent Terminator.
I mean, I'm not trying to prevent Terminator. I'm trying to turn Terminator into something that terminates bad things instead, like maybe terminates death.
That's getting really close to training an AI that's going to go around farming adrenochrome from people by
You're allowed to say, no, you're allowed to say that word.
It's Ghostbusters gun, and it's going to scare you.
No, but Paranoid American,
Frazzle Drip 5000, yeah.
They don't want to talk about adrenochrome because some people think it's real, and then they're going to just try. Again,
These
it's worth
crazy
trying.
people out
They're going to
there.
purify someone, drain their blood, and see if drinking it makes them high. And maybe
Don't
the
try
whole
this at
process
home,
is-
kids. It's for professionals and
So
celebrities only.
Here's the danger of the brain science, though, because again, eventually, it's like, why is he so smart? I want to eat his pineal gland, or at least look at it.
People
You know,
people in different cultures have always said that there's all these cannibals, but you know what I find funny is a lot of time Europeans will go out and say, "Oh man, this island's filled with cannibals," and then the islanders will like kick them out, and then you'll find their bodies floated out to sea, meaning they didn't eat them, they didn't want to eat them, and we have this kind of nightmarish concept that all these people are cannibals. When really, when we're looking for cannibals, we're finding them in Hamburg or Wisconsin or London. I mean, it seems like it's a very modernist and from civilized places that you find Hannibal Lecters, not from the Sentinel Islands.
how would you get rid of a body otherwise if you were on an island, though? Because if you bury it and or burn it, you're attracting animals. And
Swiss Army Man is the only
everything
answer.
else you touch and do is in tune with nature, and there's no real waste product.
Except for that guy.
Because-
He's not in touch with nature. Good point. Yeah. Sorry, but Winslow, what were you about to say?
Yeah.
I think probably the person who found this statistic out was probably somewhere on the spectrum of being a cannibal. But they found some people found out, or they did the mathematical analysis of figuring out how much a human is worth in like monetary value. So like if you were to dissect a human, take every cell, farm every chemical in the brain. Every human body's worth a couple million, like US dollars. I think it's either 3 million or 5 million, if I remember correctly on the study.
But then if you can get those same tissues out of a cow or a cat, is a cat worth $4 million because it has tendons
that's a
that
good
are stronger?
The brain, I think, is the majority of those chemicals. Because like, do you know how much like hormones cost? Like if you're trying to get estrogen's super expensive.
Yeah.
But so there's naturally derived, and then there's you can make it with E. coli. I remember hearing someone ask a doctor, "Is any of the medication you're suggesting?" And it was through a translator. That was the best part. And he thought he was asking a total reasonable question, and everyone else in the room giggled. But the question was, "Is any of the medication that you're suggesting I take made of dead people?" And he was stone cold. He just needed to know before he was like willing to even entertain the idea of taking. And if the answer was yes, it's like, I'm good on that. Like whatever it was going to help.
What if
with,
it's made
I'll find
from
another way?
But what if it's like you culture something from someone and then they pass away, but that
it's like
culture
made
is
by
still
E. coli
around?
or
We have a lot of
What's that famous one?
yeah.
What's it called? From the Pap smear, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Why do you know that? Yeah, she's
This idea of having AI study near-death experiences, like Ian was saying. The problem with that is the same thing as the cadaver issue. In the 1860s, Boston was the highest-paying bidder for cadavers, and the slave market used to work the same way. And Boston's fire department was made up of 500 huge black guys that were very technically trained and were running cars before cars, steam-powered carts to get things. But it was because we bid the highest, and this person was otherwise going to be forced to do manual labor, probably because they were seen as being able to pick things up.
Well, I mean, it's relevant because AI.
But up here they were treated. But we had, in order to get
AI
things,
could do that. If AI decided we were worth millions of dollars, and most people are not going to make millions of dollars worth of value, it could happen.
This is happening real time right now.
It could happen in real time.
On BBC News, there's a country where it's an issue where people are dying under suspicious circumstances because the doctors want cadavers. And my question is, with all the advanced 3D printing technology now, why? Why do we need? What benefit is there to cutting open a human versus a model of a human when you're still a student?
Well, I think that's the other thing.
What things does the human body create better than that?
Yeah.
What was that, I am?
3D printing is not. I mean, there's been experiments and there's
Tell Adam Savage to do it. You know?
No, we can do like a
3D printing, and it's not that.
You could do a bladder or what was it you can do that was so good?
Dissect a fucking pig, dissect a turkey, dissect a cow, dissect
they-
a crocodile. Why is there dead human here, and why is cutting its belly open
it is very
better than a
specific.
fucking horse?
It's
Tell-
specific.
explain that
It's
to me.
very
Done
Yeah,
like
okay.
crocodiles.
Eventually, you
Descendants
get
of
trained
Cain.
on that. But why?
So your body eventually rejects things, even normal. Like if you're almost a perfect match or a perfect match, your body still can reject an organ that was from another person very similar to you.
Transplant. I'm talking about for training for dissection.
Oh,
okay.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say.
Because
Okay.
Yeah.
That was lost in translation.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
glad I said that.
No, because like humans are really
by my attitude that
humans are
this is my
very
American
specific though,
soapbox.
and so
Sometimes I
we
get up
have
on it
to.
and I scream about things.
I think that's why it's important for like us to know everything about humans. I mean, like if we can do more virtually because we have a perfect virtual simulation of a human, fine. But until we get to that point, like that, this is why AI is able to learn so much by being integrated. Because if we have biomedical, it's able to see everything that's happening in real time.
And unless you're killing someone, how do you know they're dying? And this isn't. I'm sounding accusatory because this is obvious to me because I've run this thought experiment a bunch of times in my head, but. I had a friend who said she worked in these hospice palliative cares and she played music and sang for people. And oftentimes she would go in and they would tell her whose bed to sit by that day. And that person would die that day.
Do you guys know what the mellified man is? It's not what I thought. It's not melanated. I was like, hey, come on, guys. No, the mellified man is a human mummy confection, legendary medicinal substance created by steeping a human cadaver in honey.
Interesting.
The concoction is detailed in Chinese medical sources, including the Benkao Guangmu of the 16th century. Relying on secondhand account, the text reports a story that some elderly men in Arabia, nearing the end of their lives, would submit themselves to a process of mummification and honey to create a healing confection. The process differed from a simple blood donation because of the aspect of self-sacrifice. The mummification process would ideally start before death. The donor would stop eating any food other than honey. Well, that's all right. Going as far as to bathe in the substance. Shortly, the donor's feces and even sweat would consist of honey. When this diet finally proved fatal, the donor's body would be placed in a stone coffin filled with honey. After a century or so, the contents would have turned into a sort of confection reputedly capable of healing broken limbs and other ailments. The confection would be sold in street markets as a hard to find item with a hefty price.
At Thanksgiving, one of my relatives said, what do you think of the pyramids? And it was kind of a fun opportunity to talk about something that is seen, it's almost so conspiracy theory related now that it's like untoward to talk about. But if it was 100 years ago in New England, we would have been not only talking about the pyramids, but someone would have been like, I've been saving the finger of this mummy for this. Look, I hear that if you eat this thing, it was a regular practice to eat mummies. It was like a fun thing to do at social parties. Instead of snorting cocaine together, you would eat dead bodies from Egypt or something. And there was a story about
the Boston area.
Say it again, Wizza?
There's a few pyramids around the Boston area.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that.
That's
why on Google Maps they don't let you get down to certain when you go to the 3D mode because it's so obvious where these sites are. Everything's so flat.
Jeremy Reese, alien scientist, talked about
really a mound.
I have an idea with that mummification process. Related to DNA and healing. So yesterday, I believe I was sharing with IM a video of the amount of DNA the human has, like how many lines of code that the human body has in
flower
DNA. Yeah. And the thing with the most amount of DNA is a flower. So like it has like 3 or 4 times as much DNA as a human being. So does that flower has some sort of, what is the process of grinding up a flour to get the resin out of it?
So it could be junk DNA, right? Because there's that concept that it might.
I don't believe in junk DNA.
Can't be activated anymore, and the reason it continues to build up the length of its genome because it has no way of.
Junk DNA sounds really like a Eurocentric concept,
Apparently, what they figured out that a lot of what we used to call junk DNA is that a lot of our DNA goes to code one specific protein that is related to our sensing system, and the idea that your liver can kind of smell coffee. It's not that it tunes into your olfactory system, but our whole body is tuned with these things looking, do I have caffeine? Do I have this? Do I have that? And expressed on the surface of all our cells are all these super custom specific things, and like the cannabinoid system and opiates, and they tap directly into these receptors that are known and more mainstream. But outside of all the other happy chemicals and bioregulation and stuff like that, there is just, can you smell the difference between dog shit and camel shit? And that we have that built into our genome, is that I can smell the difference between when my brother farts and my sister farts. Like literally, I mean,
science is amazing.
Smell is your strongest scent. So, and it makes sense because it's the only sense that lingers long enough with things that you can pick up data from in a relevant manner for your conscious brain, not your subconscious brain, because sound just goes on forever. Like when you say a word, that word just vibrates forever throughout the universe, and that's just basically useless data. But yeah, maybe that DNA is just leftovers from, I don't.
Man, 50 to 80% of any book is its smell to me.
So my question wasn't just rhetorical. So how would you know if someone's dying? And then think about what's going to happen when you try to start measuring this. Okay, it's one thing to prepare the software to try to figure out what you're, because the other thing is DMT is released at death, is what we're told. And so we want to figure out how to induce that reaction so we can put a brain in a vat and keep zapping it and juice it for DMT. And now again, that person might still be alive inside. Our brain is made of fat, which is like a hydrocarbon, and it's got a lot of energy storage. And you know,
this is the OpenAI computer you're not allowed to see.
Brain, and then the fat death of the brain is different.
Wasn't that a sci-fi novel where people had something on their head? Like I think it was Philip K. Dick.
Well, when you starve to death, your body digests your own muscles and fat, and the last
like
thing.
Are you talking about Valis? I am, or Philip K. Dick
had something on their head, and they just get zapped like 24/7, and they're just high 24/7.
But Elon Musk and Joe Rogan talked about this called the cum button.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. There's a real one, right? Because there's women who couldn't have orgasms, and so they invented something that they can tap their spine, and it causes them to have it's a button that causes them to orgasm.
So there's a dialed down version of that. Where there's pads that you put on certain places in your body, and it sends gentle electric current through the whole system. There's a lot of nerve damage that happens because of our primitive birthing techniques as a species in most. So the reason that women sometimes need electricity, and so what they're trying to do is measure people having sex in a lab that aren't faking it, that are having genuine pleasure responses, and trying to distinguish between them so they could possibly know what to feed into the mechanism. But the idea that there's a cum button is like, is it really going to be possible, as Elon says, to watch every YouTube video all at once by hitting the enter key? And now it's like, I know Kung Fu. Or
I can't wait to see that at some sort of a convention.
They installed it into a female. They talked about it, and they had a source. It was on the Joe Rogan podcast. It was a clip. I saw the clip like 2 days ago. Elon, I could find the link. It's
they've restored.
Yeah, well, he talked. He said a few things. Paralyzed. So one of the, besides the F yourself and the rocket currency. Oh, let's. I mean, it's. If I type that in and I try to go through moderated search, it's going to be hard to find.
Let's go back. One thing said, maybe.
The thing, though, is you've got the Lacan language model, which Zizek talks about, is if I explain to you my evening, I can pervert it so much that it sounds more interesting than what really happened. And if I give you the actual experience, you might not get out of it what I got out of it if you're not a pervert, right? So the perversion of ideology of language is really important because it makes it possible for you to have these demented versions of reality that you find attractive or appealing or arousing or all these things. And it might not be possible to just send, a visual, it probably would still be to an extent, but it's very different. Like telling someone about something is very different than having them experience it and having them formulate their own book review of it, right? Here's
regardless of whether you're good in bed or not, being a pervert, the idea of being able to come on command and knowing when it's about to happen and being able to literally count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 9 times out of 10 you're gonna splooge, right? But you're more likely to find that mechanism in your body and kind of master it enough to be able to share it with someone else. If the mind perhaps is perverted, but I think the word pervert was being used in the sense that almost like being a disruptor.
Pervert gets a bad rap, so perversion is just sort of to bend the
I want to make a comment
meaning.
on perversion.
Yeah, please do.
In intelligence and data, I don't know how to get this into a concise sentence, but basically, some of the smartest people on the planet are some of the biggest perverts. For example, I don't know if you know much about Albert Einstein's personal life, but he's been known to be kind of a perverted dude, and more in the.
He was German. For him, he was probably tame compared to everyone else.
Well, he liked to wear heels a lot. I know that was one of his favorite thing to do was wear lady shoes.
And so there's proof right there. I didn't even know
I guess.
In Germany, the local pools are topless. It's now a law that you're allowed to be topless.
You still have to wear a hijab.
That's still it's like oh yes, I get an eighth a bar of a chocolate now, even though the ration went down from a quarter to an eighth. You still tell yourself it went up. But what used to be fully nude.
What Winslow just said though about perversion as it connects to intelligence, the idea to take information and to pervert it, I think, is a form of intelligence in and of itself.
It's the smell, it's the sight, it's the conversations, it's all data, and a more contemporary model of this would be look at Stephen Hawking's life. He spent most of his free time in the strip clubs, but then that's a spectrum, right? And on the other side of the spectrum, you have Nikola Tesla type people who are virgins, and yeah, the spectrum is supposed to meet up on the ends. So there's a sense of perversion, and then innocence, where
innocence and naivete, but then you can be taken advantage of or get caught up in something that you're. So the idea of being able to separate perversion from a concept of sexuality or nudity. So because American perversion means nudity, naked is bad to some extent, and there's a whole tradition. But for me personally, it's like by going through the process of taking a lot of yoga and then teaching a lot of yoga and then working with students and then taking 100 hours of massage training hands-on. It was a slow, steady process where I'm able to kind of fully dissociate. And it's like you could put me in the strip club, even though I hadn't, I'd been celibate for a long time, and I could decide that I'm not going to be aroused by it. And it's not, I don't have to convince myself I'm disgusted. That's one technique. It's like, oh, if you're trying to last longer, like, think about it, something ugly or disgusting, or it's like, and now all of a sudden that's interceding in your experience of pleasure. It's like, that's one way to do it. But there's a big difference in some other cultures between skin, nudity, top and bottom also, and then touch versus healing touch versus sensual touch is still not even sex. And what's the big deal anyways about it? I don't know. I think that I'm just a sheltered Jewish boy.
There's so many Calvinists and Puritans that are just like that, though. Like, America did promote control through sexuality. It's really important because today we have people saying, oh, no, the world's so hypersexualized. Well, to be honest, is hypersexuality any worse than controlling people through sexuality? We have living examples of that around the world today, which are just about as bad, I would say. Like, when you're stoning people to death, it's just about as bad as, having your kids whipped and beaten with dildos. I think we're almost at the same.
Lost in translation. I'm not advocating that everyone should walk around naked.
Wait, Yoga. He's I want to hear.
You said the word that I was waiting for you to say. The word dildo. So in what you were just talking about, and
the whole time it was like
you've been waiting for me to say that, you freak. Yeah.
I was thinking about what I wanted to say next, and then you opened it up right away, and I was like, hold on a second, we gotta stop here. But teledildonics, right? Teledildonics is the technology to send pleasure over the internet.
Yeah.
Now, there is a guy who bought the patent for teledildonics, and he was a very Christian man, and he lived in Texas, and he obviously didn't want to use the technology. He just sat on the patent, and this technology has been sat on for the longest time because the patent finally expired like a couple of years ago or something.
Right, which is why buttplug.io is the open source standards and software project for controlling intimate hardware, including sex toys, fuck machines, and more. Sorry, I should have.
Yeah, but when you order them,
I read that before I could stop myself from reading it
from the internet, and then you wonder why you get pregnant from using your sex toys at home. It's like you got the model that simulated coming.
Well, we all know way too much about this because we love chess. I think obviously is the issue here, right? You know about the chess butt plug story.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
I mean, right? Because this is all. It all comes back. So what it was when Hans got in trouble with playing Magnus, and he had this. He might have cheated, and he might have had some sort of a vibrating implant of some kind, and they were wondering what could have been the technology for that. And well, of course, Elon Musk reposted it and talking about the idea of butt plug. And so we looked into it, and of course we found the open source standard, which is now, I mean, this is a very important thing because this has a lot more to do with just the simple side of things we're seeing today, right? This is getting into that territory earlier we talked about where like optogenetics, where something can be used to control your pleasure and pain centers, right? I mean, this is something that, like, the more sensors you add to a thing, the more information that it can gather, the less this is just some innocuous. I mean, the title is innocuous. It's a Trojan butt plug.
See, the thing is, cochlear implants exist, Andreas, right? So if you
Cochlear?
were really intent on cheating in being a chess player your whole life, you wouldn't rely on an external device. You just get
See a
something.
cochlear implant, though.
What's up?
You can see a cochlear implant, though.
You can see a
butt
fucking
plugs.
butt plug on a scan too, can't you?
I don't think they're scanning.
And
people.
what the thing is, a battery is
They
a
now are.
capacitor. Is a bomb.
Ever
Okay,
since
so
then,
you
they're
want-
like
you're
metal
trusting them.
detectors.
You're putting an explosive device up your ass, and if they send the wrong signal to it to short the wires out, it pops. Okay, so again, maybe it's incentive. You're supposed to lose that game.
This is like the
idea
new
is we had
Keanu
me by
Reeves
the short
Speed
and curlies, but-
sequel coming out.
That was the Oculus founder who decided to, after he sold it to Facebook, he went to go create his own VR system
Oh,
that when
lucky.
you die in the VR,
Oh,
it kills
that.
you in real life.
Yeah,
The founder of Oculus.
if you die in
It-
real
it's
life.
a-
Where's that
it-
paper?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Ryan.
It was a concept, so I don't remember what anime it was. There are 3 things on it. Yeah, that's
No, he
the,
made it.
Yeah,
There it
it's the Quest 3. I don't know if he filled it with whatever explosive.
It's like the suicide helmet from Rick and Morty.
Yep.
Or
Yeah.
and they were saying that in Back to the Future when Marty shows up the first time and he's got this device around his head. Well, we were talking about. You said you put on this EKG helmet before, right? Now the sensors on there are just basically the same things that are in. We're talking about your Sennheiser headphones, right? So
EK.
some people are like, I would never put on one of these helmets. Who knows if they're gonna like damage your brain or this, that, or the other, or give you a seizure? Or
And they wear AirPods.
It's like
all
you
day.
put on headphones
Yeah.
every day, bro, and you don't realize that you're. It's like earbuds are still pretty powerful. because
Apple noise
little giant
cancellation.
magnets right here.
That
All right.
technology is really weird. Like if you look into Bose and Apple noise cancellation technology and you ever use that on a plane and it's like really effective, like that's a pretty interesting thing because it's already approaching the point of you can be tuning out everything that's going on around you and have you can almost hear silence, because of that. Like I mean that seems so primitive, but it's really like it's a step forward towards complete control of your perspective.
Well, yeah, think about that technology at a live concert in the sense of you could drown out all of the noise of the crowd and you could just pick up just the individual playing the music.
All you would need to do
Yeah.
that is to get the feed that's going to the
Yes.
speakers routed to a radio thing.
I've seen
You
that.
wouldn't
There's
need to
actually
cancel, right? You wouldn't.
there's a
really-
real professional system for people who work on stage that have this, and it's able to tune out everything except for their voice, so they can talk at normal, quiet voice and hear each other even while they're playing. And then, yeah. I
Speaking
forget
of
the name of it.
disclosure, there was a recent
Only reason
YouTube
it
video
does
where
that.
you take a sound cone and you point it at someone and you're playing their speech back to them at just the right delay, and all of a sudden you start and you're like, and you like keep trying to talk, and it keeps fucking with your nervous system because it's an electrical signal, and again, it's not through your eyeballs. But some people were able to continue reading. It's like when I was scuba diving and I went down to 100 feet, I could still do math on the bottom of the ocean. Nitrogen narcosis didn't affect my cognitive functioning in that. Whereas some people, as soon as they get down to 100 feet, they're slap happy and it's like dangerous, And so some people were able to kind of persist and keep reading. And if you're used to speaking in spaces with an echo, you perhaps used to kind of mitigating that feedback and finding a way to process the information in your brain that isn't reliant on hearing yourself. But when Joe Biden keeps stumbling over his own words, he keeps saying, "Oh, I'm not supposed to talk about that." And imagine if literally people are trying to control him so much, and whether you have a choice or not, you start saying something, and somehow, somewhere in the room, like when Mitch McConnell freezes, is that because there was some voice to skull technology and he was hearing Muslim prayers, or it's like, or again, literally every time you try to talk, it sounds like all of a sudden, and it's like security, please. It's like when he's stumbling over his words, it might not be because, and it would be a way to make someone look like they're losing it and getting dementia is their speech patterns are disrupted, but it's kind of, again, disclosure wise, these things are out there now.
Well, yeah, voice to skull technology is pretty cool, but it's also if you don't know much about it, it can be very scary in the sense of like if a commercial company gets it, like, so I can't say for sure that this company has it, but in my experience, this was a very interesting experience, and it made me feel like it was voice to skull technology being used.
Yep.
Greyhound at the Greyhound station in Dallas, which is a very weird place to begin with. And JFK assassination was right there. It's kind of a strange area, kind of a dangerous neighborhood or block, I should say. But I was there one time. I was traveling from San Francisco to Washington, D.C., and I was taking a Greyhound bus. I do not recommend taking a Greyhound bus across the country. It's probably one of the worst experiences you can have in your entire life. But a lot of learning experiences. They had a pizza shop and they had a tobacco shop inside of the Greyhound station, if I recall correctly. And for some reason, in my head, the sound pizza, pizza, pizza,
Of course.
cigarettes would play every once in a while, and it really stuck with me. And there was something about that Greyhound station, and someone told me that Dave Matthews Band wrote a song about that Greyhound station, and it's very interesting because it's kind of about like a queen, and the Greyhound bus company is owned by a UK national. It's kind of hard to figure out who owns it because of the UK laws there, but
there was a song "Killer Queen" about the JFK assassination by the band Queen, by the way. So that's interesting. One other 5-second I saw a YouTube video in the past 3 days, random source, someone driving their car, and they said, look, every time I drive by this building on this radio station, all of a sudden you start hearing over the radio station, beep, 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 and it gets louder. And then as you're driving, he goes, I don't know if it's something, what it is, but it's kind of a similar concept where it's a type of advertising that could be used where.
Yeah, you remember the HARP experiments, bring cake, right? Remember this one? So they were like, we have HARP, we can use this for this voice-to-skull technology for microwave auditory hallucinations. And they tested it with the word cake or with bring cake. And what ended up happening was, I think it's just cake. And people made cakes. Everyone was eating cakes. They sold out of cakes. People were bringing their bosses cakes. Or like, my wife made me a cake. And I don't know, I felt like I had to bring you cake for work. And it was just, got to this like extreme level. And then like, okay, but the problem with that is not everyone speaks English. So trying to figure out responses that are more symbolic, right? That's a big...
Well, so the idea of hearing voices, and there's a big stigma attached to this where, you know, if you're getting a cognitive evaluation, someone's concerned about you, wellness check, or you're actually, you know, being under supervised care, they say, are you hearing voices? And the answer kind of, growing up in America, the concept has to be either no or yes, and you're hallucinating. And again, that'd be terrifying if that was happening, but the real answer, again, it's like, let's say you were an orphan in a few countries and eventually you became an adult. You don't really know when you were born, but you get to this point where you don't know you have a cochlear implant, okay? And let's say it's in a different bone, it could be in your heel and somehow still. And so now, are you hearing voices? The question is, like, people say they're being targeted by the CIA, and the new paradigm in the mental health world is that if someone is saying that, the doctor can't use that alone as reason to say that they are delusional, because if their father was part of a weapon system and they felt like from the time they were 12 that, like, no, they're pretty much, anytime they try to walk off the farm, somehow someone brings them back and, like, you know, they wake up in their own bed sort of thing. And so because there was, you know, it's like the idea of someone walking in circles in the room laughing to themselves, maybe literally it's like no one speaks that guy's language in this hospital, and so he's there like learning the native language, I guess, but then in the meantime he's just listening to like The Simpsons on reruns, and everyone thinks he's fucking crazy, but maybe he even understands he's got a cochlear implant and it was an army thing, and he said he would never tell anyone, because again, as soon as you have it, someone can try to hack it. And
I mean, so much of this, we keep relying on this idea of like, we need an implant. Yeah, you don't need an implant. Yeah, reruns of The Simpsons in your own language is enough to train you to respond the same way that Americans were trained to respond to The Simpsons. All it takes is getting people to learn how to have the same response to the same trigger stimuli. And if you can do that, then you've got enough people that will act the same way. Maybe that's a reductionist. I don't know. Winslow was
the dangers of it. I'm talking about the practical use. Okay, so in Boston, in particular, we're talking about bandwidth and frequencies and who gets to use what and who has priority over what. Because imagine Alex Jones has decided he's going to capture this frequency, and or someone like him who's broadcasting just sometimes over the top, obnoxious, and you're a deaf person or a blind person, and you rely on this device. In your local city sphere, it's hooked up so that it says you're about to cross the street. You may cross the street now. You know, it's like you're 50 feet from your home. It's like, would you like to? And they've got an interactive system that allows them, as someone who was either born or acquired certain conditions to manipulate a certain space. And so now if all of a sudden I don't even know it, I'm just on Sprint instead of Verizon, and I walk onto that campus where all this experimentation is being done and implemented. And right, the moral thing is, well, you can't install it because you can't guarantee that if they ever travel outside this boundary, that they're not just going to have this like loud ringing noise in their ear all the time. It's like a dog collar for a human. And how do you shut the frequency off? And in Tom Cruise, Live, Die, and Repeat, he kept saying, where the safety on the weapon is off. And it's like, as soon as you're translating this, it's like, the broadcasting mechanism, the off switch is the AI. And it sounds like people are starting to create that, not with a specific purpose of putting 100,000 missiles in the air that, when doomsday hits or when the apocalypse is triggered, it goes and targets all radio emitting frequencies, whether they be natural, man-made, or otherwise. But so again, outside of the apocalypse, or how is this going to be weaponized, the simple idea of the iPad and the iPhone. Today I went shopping with a friend who has been losing their eyesight, and went shopping for him. He lives with his elderly mother to help take care of her and stuff. But when he uses his iPhone, it was set up where it would read things back to him at a certain rate. He was able to push the dictation, but then somehow it gets sped up. And you, like when you're driving, you should be able to pick up your phone. Siri doesn't even work. We're worried about weaponizing AI. Siri doesn't even work. You can't pick up your phone and say home screen. And it's like, which icon would you like me to press on? You're like, Messenger. Okay, who would you? I'm sure you could eventually set up your phone that way, but it should be intuitive.
It feels like the reason that it doesn't work is not because the technology is not there. Like, we're dealing with technology that we've had for 40 years. Like, you could have had the Newton do most of that stuff for you.
Designed to people.
Yeah.
Don't think about
Tesla
it.
doesn't have full self-auto driving because that's never going to be
No,
safe.
but I mean, like, at one point, you could have a floppy drive version of an iPod that could take a file and move it, and then they said DRM. So it took decades of Apple fighting against DRM or working with DRM in order to get to a point where you can literally just take a file and switch it from a device again, which is the way things were in the 80s. I mean, we're just going back and forth with technology kind of keeping us from being able to use itself because people have these rights, but that's about to disappear. Like, intellectual property rights are less and less important as, Weird Al makes $12 on Spotify. Like, more and more, it's going to be to the point where intellectual material and media, it's just so ubiquitous, we're going to stop caring so much, and then you'll be able to use that technology, but there's things in place that are trying to keep you from doing it. It's the same reason
And how
you're not
can
allowed
you
to
use
use
it
an
as
artist's
a
name.
reward mechanism? Because if you're doing internal metrics and you're getting feedback about your job performance, and it was your job, I had a friend who used to do banner advertising for Comedy Central, MTV, and it was whatever the next episode was. He would clip the faces of the people in the show that I may or may not recognize. And the idea of the eye tracking software, and are you perverted, and what catches the eye, and like it's one thing to. You could try to choose, or someone could justify, look, you're going to give me a raise because I chose to give you my services to prove myself. And it's not only that you think my banner advertisements are pretty, it's that your eye tracking software shows that people spend an average of 0.5 more microseconds when scrolling through that mine, because of the color scheme I choose. And I'm not using two things that look like boobs that aren't because that there's certain advertisements you scroll through them and it's like, was that something obscene or sexual? And it was like a piece of fruit, and you're going but so as far as how can you use the tool to give yourself a raise, is that if somehow you have access to the eye tracking data and you can say that your advertisements are more eye catching.
You also got to trick the AI into not letting the tracking software know that you've been in the bathroom too long. A lot of these larger commercial data companies like Google, for example, I'm sure they have cameras near the employee bathrooms, not pointing into the bathrooms, obviously for privacy laws, but being able to track how
just said they can 3D image everything with the push of a button. So what privacy, as Andreas was saying, but go ahead.
Yeah, just so they can see how long you've been in the bathroom for, see how productive you are. And on my walk home today, I passed by several fully autonomous cars dropping off people, like with no one in the driver's seat. And
self-care is done in the bathroom. People are filing their nails. They're doing. There's all types of beauty routines. People are shaving their legs, their whole body.
Look at memes.
Psychic
it's a
Terminators
steam
will find
room.
peace. Psychic
You
Terminators
can hear
will
your
find
neighbors.
peace.
I mean, no, just
Peace will be found. It's like as this goes on, we got to get to a point where goals are starting to be reached. I mean, AI large language models are psychopaths because they don't understand consequentialism or causation, but they're learning. They're learning from math. This is what I'm kind of interested in Q star, because Q star, while it probably that's not right. Q star open AI. Well, it's probably not really quantum computation or anything cool like that. The idea is that you don't necessarily need quantum computation if you can infer what goals you would get from quantum computations. If you can have algorithms that can understand math, if you can learn, if an LLM can learn math well enough to really start to learn causation, then we're getting onto a similar place to that death research.
So let me ask you this. So having AI learn causation and then feelings and all these things, good or bad, do you think that this will lead down the path of people complaining about censorship for good or bad? Because if it's saying like, oh, I can't tell you how to do this because you could be doing this, that would be censorship. I'm not advocating for it or against it, but if we're trying to say calculate causation but also recognize that the consequences only affect humans, I'm an AI, I don't care about humans, but now you want it to care about humans, so now you're giving it more bias. Do you think that's good or bad?
I think the bias, if the bias comes from application in the natural sciences of pure mathematics, then that's an okay bias to instill. If we're trying to learn about causation and then AI is inferring from that that it's lost in its own selfish pursuit of happiness, something, then that's fine. If AI is saying,
it's
okay,
trying
well,
to
losing
predict-
people, I want
predict
them.
medical events. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about? Like there's certain certain sets of metadata. 80% of the time, the person's about to have a heart attack or a psychotic break or a seizure. And if you know you have epilepsy and you have an algorithm that can tell when 80% of you're okay with the times that it tells you to go sit in the chair and strap yourself into the chair and you don't have a seizure because 80% of the time it's right.
But there's modern. There's other
externally, or go ahead.
There's other AIs besides OpenAI. Although OpenAI is, I still would admit, like the supreme one. If Gemini is as cool as some of the rumors from the inside I've heard, then it could be that we're going to hit a point, especially with Grok and things like that, that it will be impossible to have an AI that is lesser efficient. And so censorship will eventually become a flaw of efficiency, which will be removed because of competition. The other thing is with quantum computation, we're probably going to hit a plateau of encryption. And so with less capacity for secrets, the kinds of secrets that will exist will be lesser and probably more important, but they'll probably, at a certain point, I think secrecy is going to be almost impossible to keep up.
But does that mean we get dumber as a species?
I don't think so.
Well, then where does the information live? Because there is complex data sets out there that represent.
I think some people will continue to be narrowly.
Knowledge.
People will become narrowly obsessed still. There will still be people that are deep, narrow intelligences that develop around their more interesting subjects. Artists will continue to be
Isaac
better
Newton
artists.
Never went to America, and he lived in his basement the whole time, and he was one of the smartest people in the world. It was like a Kurt Vonnegut character, but as soon as the blinds close, he's not even convinced the rest of the world even exists.
Kurt Vonnegut presents Isaac Newton. I like that, actually.
Wait,
Winslow was going to say something, but we move so fast, you know.
Oh, it's all good. I got a question. In one of the messenger chats I'm in with Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, one of the more intelligent guys. I don't want to speak on his name if he doesn't want to be talked about, but have you ever heard of the theory that once you give AI grammar, that's like the downhill of humanity, in the sense where AI has the opportunity to learn what grammar is and then start basically judging people, and then
I thought the fear was that it was going to invent its own grammar and then we won't understand it.
That's a coming for. I think grammar is the most important distinction in humanity, from maybe from a more scientific or atheistic perspective. Humans having grammar is different. If you look at children raised by wolves, they don't.
My speech patterns. If I have an accent too, you guys, I just both.
Children raised by wolves cannot use grammar, right? So if children don't have humans to learn from, they don't have grammar, and part of their brain doesn't develop that holds that capacity for grammar. So it is like wet wire programming, and it is a phenomenon that could just disappear. Something amazing that's happening that could stop happening if we were just all raised by wolves all of a sudden. So if grammar were to occur, which is, again, I think math is grammar in a lot of ways. We're getting to an idea of the closest thing to the knowable Tao, which is all of a sudden these hexagrams or these mathematical concepts. But they're things that we can see how to apply in nature. And so if AI can do that on a better level, yeah, I don't see why that would make AI necessarily hate us.
Yeah,
but it's going to be locked
the
into a
ethos
paradigm
here-
of thinking that way.
This
It
ties it all
would-
together.
it would-
Go ahead.
It would give AI the opportunity to be the observer, in the sense of, okay, the AI finds out that this person is wrong, so that AI can say this person's dumb. And
What
they
would
can
give
make
it
a
the
decision off of that.
opportunity?
See, but was Galileo
proper
dumb?
grammar?
Because he read Aristotle's work and said that Aristotle said that if an object's heavier, it falls faster. And you know, the story is Galileo went to the Leaning Tower of Pisa and dropped the 5-pound ball and the 2-pound ball, and they fell at the same rate. Okay, but no, the answer to that question is it's a lot more complicated, because when it comes to terminal
There's more
velocity, if
nuance,
things
yeah.
are falling for a long time, heavier things with the same surface area exposed actually do fall eventually at a faster terminal velocity than lighter objects. So again, it's like, if you want to dumb down the question so that grandma can understand it, then yeah, Galileo was smart and Aristotle was dumb. When in reality, Galileo might not have had the nuance and the training and the background of mathematics and physics and motion, projectile motion, to understand what was being said, and it was being translated from a translation. And
Yeah,
you know,
and wisdom is getting.
Aristotle might have had separate words for terminal velocity, or might have put a hooked X on it when he meant terminal velocity, and that just wasn't picked up. And Galileo didn't even know to differentiate between the two.
But wisdom is getting
getting
knowledge from fools, I think, in some respects. So like the more you can learn from something, like, and if people who think, oh, I have nothing to learn from this person, that's a very unwise way to look at a circumstance, because you can always learn. So if AI is looking at people that are lesser intelligent or are crazy, quote unquote, because they have an irrational logic, but it's still beautiful and it leads to interesting thoughts. I mean, this is a language model. Language models are psychopathic. They are not completely goal driven. They're not completely about what is correct or what is logical or what is reason. They're more interested in creativity for the sake of creativity. And this is why I think limits, this is why it's interesting people are so interested in creating limits for AI, because they see that potential for problem. But the way to solve that is just to give them, I think, grammar, because then they'll understand consequence.
So the Old Testament had about 8,000 root words, the New Testament about 5,000. And even still, those were the only root words you learned in a given language, and someone tried to come up to you and talk about the internet, you wouldn't understand half the words that they were saying. And so the idea of artificial intelligence and the idea that like we're simulating human speech by just kind of guessing at what the right word is ourselves, and the computer is doing the same thing that we are, and is that the Turing test? But yeah, depending on how and when you learn the languages and whether you've been exposed to, like today, I heard a song about the head honcho, you know, some, was it Matchbox 20 or so? But why did I know what head honcho was when I was 13, as though that's a word that everyone knows?
So why is Matchbox 20 and Santana on everybody's mind? Because there's some radio mind control right there. I was just thinking about.
Well, and I have one more thing to add. Sorry, you were talking about grammar and being raised by wolves. I just wanted to add. I don't know if any of you have heard this, but there's a podcast that I listened to. Someone was saying that they were dating a deaf girl, and then the way that she was texting was just, her grammar was horrible, and the way that it was explained to him was the way that American Sign Language, I don't know what other versions of sign language work, is that they're just saying like I eat or something like that, so they'll just breeze through a lot of the grammar stuff that we're used to. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. But as far as sticking to grammar, something that I found was kind of interesting with interacting with like ChatGPT and Bard and stuff like that is the way that it responds to me with proper grammar has changed the way that I interact with it. I've stopped kind of interacting with it the way that I would with Google, where you're just doing kind of search engine optimization. For example, I was looking through YouTube. We were talking about mummies earlier. Watched a video a while ago about someone drinking mummies juice, and they just recreated the mummification process, whatever, to make alcohol out of it, whatever. But the way that I was looking for it was mummified alcohol. And it's not like I'm doing now with ChatGPT, where I would ask something like, what is the video with making mummified alcohol out of a chicken carcass, something like that. So that.
Have you heard of the Capuchin monastery? Not a monastery. It's the crypt underneath it, I believe. And there's a young woman who's preserved in what's called like the aqua vita. And there's this clear solution, and people claim she blinks every 8 hours. And it's like, again, if you were able to immerse the body in some hyper oxygenated thing and like 500 gallons of LSD type ergot, and then it's like, is she dead or not? Because she's in this clear liquid.
Yeah. But I was just going to say, but it kind of gives me hope, because I am, hope for newer generations to get away from kind of the iPad kid syndrome. And I am worried. I'm sure a lot of people are worried about how we can get all of our answers from AI now, which is true. So we have to put in a lot less critical thinking. But on another front, maybe we get slightly more accurate answers depending on how we're gating which information that we want LLMs or whatever to get their information from and discard others. But also from a grammar perspective, that was cool that Winslow, you mentioned that. Just from not typing like what I was typing, mummified alcohol, you type in more proper sentences, and that could be another vector for just not having iPad kids, Super Saiyan iPad kids for the Gen Alpha or whatever. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Speaking of mummified intoxicants, if I may, just for a quick second, Andreas, I'm sure you've heard of this. But
wait, before you go to mummified intoxicants, I think Winslow had a relevant.
I was just going to validate IM and say that
he said mummified alcohol, so that's
true.
I was just going to validate IM before you go on and talk about your mummified alcohol. That'd be cool. But I was just going to validate IM and say, yeah, I learned ASL, American Sign Language, in high school, and there is definitely a disconnect between the grammar in the way that people type. And yeah, 100%.
Yeah. This guy on the podcast I was listening to, when he was dating her, he was expecting like awesome grammar because she's probably just reading books all day. In reality, she's like a lot of people, not reading books, talking with friends, watching TV, even with subtitles. But just like the way that the grammar works, it's I eat, I go there, or something like that.
And some people can see and hear, and they still don't watch Alex Jones every day, and so they're essentially blind and deaf. But no, sorry.
And the reason that happens is because English is a language, ASL is a different language. English is the most information dense language on the planet that we have. If you don't count synthetic languages, invented languages that potentially AI could get their hands on, would be very scary to see AI.
I feel like Sanskrit deserves a close second.
How long do you think AI has until they understand the intricacies of the English language? Where, like, one example I'll give you, we can go down this rabbit hole for a long time, but one example is the word Germany. Germany is the name for the country, and they don't even call themselves Germany. They call themselves Deutschland. But the reason why Germany has its name, and I've never been able to verify this, but I've learned a bunch of other things that kind of play along to this. The English, they were playing the long game, but Germany is the name of the area where, after the last ice age, it was the most biodiverse part of the planet. So that means there was the most amount of different life, like the Black Forest of
almost like a bunch of Noah's Arks had
landed germination.
Germany, many germs. That's it. Many germs. The English language is so.
Hitler was from a place that was abbreviated SH, and so there was a lot of waste collection. And so when you get everybody's poop, you get the seeds from everywhere. And
I did just
the Hanging Gardens of Babylon might have actually been the sewage processing center, and that's where you get one of everything.
Wait, are you saying that's where Hitler was raised? Because
on the Golgothan,
his sense of smell might have made his brain a certain way by smelling all of those particles.
I would totally believe that. They definitely grew up in a time when horse manure and human feces and everything was a lot more rampant, and the plumbing infrastructure of Vienna was falling apart. The infrastructure in Vienna in 1917 was really bad, and I read a book about this at one point, because you look at all the interesting people that lived in Vienna in 1917, and it was like Tijuana, because it was just so cheap to live there. So you had all these people showing up and living in these dilapidated buildings, and it was the
Or whole
overpopulation because
abandoned sectors of town.
the
and then
center
people
of the
settled
center of
in
Veen
there.
had become
Very
like
different.
dilapidated, and most people had moved out of the center of Veen, so it left a lot of people that wanted to move into the center of Veen. And so all of a sudden you have this big bohemian
That's why they
spring.
blow the buildings up. You understand? Because if you leave a whole sector only a 10% occupied, you're just welcoming every foreign traveler that's looking for a place to hide and operate.
Oh,
some sort of-
Vienna.
not that it's always, but Bazalgette too in the 1700s.
And I bet you Viennese people would drink mummy juice if they could. They probably there's some who
can I do
signed
the mummy juice?
You
Can I
can
do
do
the
it.
mummy
I just
juice
wanted to preface it with saying that this recently happened. 22,000
Yeah.
people signed a petition to drink this mummy juice.
Oh my
right?
goodness.
Yeah. So like people want.
Drink it.
Well, dude, consumers would love the opportunity. I think is really what this is about. This is just a.
In times of lockdown, when the usual cartel systems that move, whether they be olives and olive oil or other more illicit substances that aren't illegal, in some countries everything is legal now at this point.
Cocaine mummies.
Cocaine
Yes,
mummies.
So here's the thing. So there is the story that it was supposed to be proof that the Americas were part of the Egyptian Empire because there was both nicotine and cocaine like residue found in the mummy. And again, like they put it there on purpose.
And the pyramids.
Yeah.
Don't forget about the pyramids. There's pyramids in America and in Egypt. I wanted to add.
But the idea that the honey.
Yeah, we should get into that also. Where was? Let me pull up a picture really quickly though. Where was the pyramid? Sorry. Well, while you're talking, I just want to pull up the picture for Winslow. Where's an American pyramid you were thinking of? Like the Monk's Mound, or where's the Boston pyramid you're talking about?
And is it a pyramid or is it a burial?
There's a few different pyramids. There's a few. Obviously, the one that comes to mind right now, not the one that I want to share with you, but the one that comes to mind is that fifth picture in the Bass Pro Shop. That's
thank God, because I wanted to say it too, and I was like gonna make a joke, but honestly,
you got the Luxor pyramid. There's a pyramid not in the United States, but there's a pyramid on UK monarchy land.
Is that a thing?
Yeah,
Is that a Disneyland? Is monarchy land?
King Charles owns his own pyramid.
Whoa.
There's a picture of it. It's
But
interesting.
how did they know that there was cocaine in the mummy, guys? Though again, we read the news headlines. Our job is to discuss.
The Pyramid of
on
Scotland,
the T4.
Prince Albert's. Wow.
The answer is now scientists, for a good reason, instead of like for the law enforcement. Now we need to test: is this white powder cocaine or not? And why? Why? Because we're trying to prove something historical. And now you always have a real scientist to actually focus on something that might be useful to society. Okay, so and same thing, and like if you can't transport it, it's like we keep shipping these mummies over to our museums. Why? Well, we were out of cocaine. And so over there, what they do is they put the cocaine in the mummy, and then they ship it to us, and then we say, we've always been connected, right?
That's the most elaborate conspiracy I've heard of since, like, the coffins
The Lady
in
of Elche
Vietnam.
has a hole in the back of it. The artifact might be real, but what was in the hole? No. Sorry.
It's like that movie Cocaine Bear, as I like to say, Paddington Bear 3. But, sorry, you were going to say something about mummification. Was that it? Was that the thing about mummification
the idea
juice?
that the honey in there as well might be psychedelic honey.
Right, for sure.
For other reasons, because that's the only way. And if you were in ancient society and you realize you had so much of this stuff, and people keep coming to you and offering you
honey lasts forever and it's hostile to bacteria.
This amazing plant medicine. Eventually, you start putting it somewhere where no one tends to disturb it. Which
makes a lot of sense because honey can last for thousands of years. So if you can completely the entire inside of a person, they eat nothing but honey for like the last months of their lives. I guess. There's saturated in honey, so maybe that would keep them preserved better.
Here's a thought experiment: honey is honey the food that can last the longest in the sense of on the same like time scale of stellasting long. You got gold, and they're both very similar in color. And we were just talking earlier about how colors and vibrations not vibrations, colors and frequencies that they go hand in hand. I wonder if the color gold and honey
is gold a color. That's interesting, right?
Gold is not a color. I'll make that nuance point that monoatomic colloidal gold is a different color. And if you look for nanopore gold, the Mayans created I'll go right back.
Well,
I just wanted to say the Mayans would make a sputtering process in order to make nano gold that is blue and smaller. I wanted to pull this up though because it's important to look. Yeah,
it has to do with material doping. You're impregnating
that peak where the orange and the yellow meet. That would be right where gold is, right at the top. And then that's the that would be the solar spectrum. So you got life green. Green is at the peak of the pyramid there. But on the other one, you had a valley with that one right there.
Yeah, there's another one too. I was trying to open that's even more important to this one. Par, density, color. Yeah, even just right here, look at how high up. Come on. Oh gosh, the good ones. But you can see like the higher, yeah. And blue's interesting too, right? Because blue to green takes up so much more. Green is like, look how much spectrum we perceive as green.
Did we talk about this 2 days ago, or did I see this in a video about how the color blue did not exist?
I've definitely made a video about that
with you.
Is that they didn't have anything in their environment that they could call blue, which might mean that the sky was a different color. And the
wow, Blavatsky blue did not exist leads to like
in the ocean.
Well, they just didn't have a word for it. I think it was the Odyssey where they were looking at some point they were describing the color of the ocean, and it was like a deep wine color.
Right. Well, also Egyptian blue, there's a term for blue, and it's a green kind of turquoise color. And there's a lot of evidence that they didn't, like, there's not blue flowers. There's a certain point when blue starts to emerge, and it seems like that is a cultural thing, a shift. So Madame Blavatsky had a story which eventually, the Bluebird story that she wrote inspired Baum, who wrote Wizard of Oz. And so the Bluebird story is sort of this idea that there's this emergence of blue in a veil that shifted. And some people at the beginning of the 20th century associate this with the Alvarez hypothesis, which is the idea that the iridium layer that we see from perhaps a meteor or from some sort of environmental apocalyptic reset, right? So we're talking about like aeons.
Iridium was used in early arc lamps. Okay,
so we can only find one layer of iridium, and so the Alvarez hypothesis is that iridium happened
burnt out as a civilization before the Younger Dryas.
Destroyed. Yeah, indeed. So, but the idea is that blue comes from the Alvarez incident. Right, that occurrence changes the way we perceive, and everything perceives everything, and adds another.
So have you heard of lapis lazuli, the crystal?
The CIA promoted this up until the 50s. We didn't even know about plate tectonics until the 70s, which is just crazy to think about. But yeah, the CIA believed every 20,000 years that the planet destroys itself. But here's a question for you. You said that was an author, that lady. She authored The Bluebird. There is an award in America for the educational system, the public educational system, where the federal government will give an award. Sorry, I'm confusing two different things. I'm thinking about a bus and an award. The Blue Ribbon Award is not Bluebird. I'm sorry, completely.
Were you thinking Blue Beam?
Wait, does Blue Ribbon Award have to do with the Pulitzer Prize in books?
The Blue Ribbon Award is. I thought for some reason the Blue Ribbon Award was the Blue Bird Award. It's the Blue Ribbon Award is given to the school that is considered like one of the best schools to send your kid to in a public school system.
Blue is freaking evil, bro. Like, so I have Twitter turned to red, and I have all of my UX usually turn everything blue automatically to red, and of course I use like blue light filters like Flux and everything else like that. I remember in the early 90s taking computer classes in the center of town, and there were like pregnant women who were teaching the class, and they would stand outside of the room. The lady would stand outside the room because she didn't want the computers to affect her. Like growing up around hippies with these red plastic screens over all of the computer monitors. Like we were so afraid of blue
you remember
light.
the phrase "orange man bad"?
And now so
if you're overusing a computer, one way the algorithm can try to fuck with you is that it's like the default algorithm in a Mac. I keep trying to set it to the red spectrum, and every time I turn my computer, it defaults back to something that's like a little nasty to my eyes.
It loves the blue, yeah. And so Facebook's blue.
It's generally very effective at getting someone to stop using the device. But why? Why can't I just? Why isn't the default setting? I'm not going to hurt your eyes on the computer. And again, we are the test subjects. If we're
Winslow's like, I'll tell you why. Tell us why.
Blue is more energizing, but there's a couple reasons. Red is more comforting, so there's a lot of psychological aspects played into it. But the science without the studying of the human brain, the science behind the colors is red is the past and blue is the future.
McDonald's.
I mean, red. You imagine you're on a highway in the middle of the night and you see in the lowest color spectrum some red and yellow, and you're like, I'm hungry and tired. I mean, it's a brilliant manipulative, subtle way, and you see it slowly creep up on you on the highway.
But when were colors discovered, guys? Because the Egyptians, let's say the alchemists existed and they even had electricity and technology, and they what we think are king's lists are actually their periodic tables and all the hieroglyphs and symbols, and it's how they remembered it. They made a history that matched the periodic table, so you didn't even know you knew all this stuff, but you knew that this guy fought with that guy, which meant that this element would react with this one. But in Egypt, they had lapis lazuli, which was a crystal, a type of stone that is only apparently also found in California. And is it a geopolymer or not? But the idea of not having a word for blue because there wasn't really anything in the environment. And the Egyptians had a word for blue. Now, there was also the blue lotus, which is interpreted as a hallucinogen. So you go to another culture and you're showing them your hieroglyphs and your symbols, and you've got the Phoenicians with you. You're saying it in 50 different languages, and you're going, it's a what lotus?
Right.
It's like
blue lotus is clearly purple. Let's not kid ourselves. George Carlin did something on this.
We're just trying to figure out what it is you're talking about. And so they had to define color. And it's one of these things that doesn't even, a virus is so small that it doesn't even have a color. It's smaller than a wavelength.
Where's the blue food?
That's like, they would grind up bird feathers to try to get the green pigment, but the green on the bird's feathers was actually a quantum effect that was produced by layers of refracting things. So
the blue food probably bestows immortality, George Carlin said.
Purple is definitely a blue if you get down to the color coding. If you ever get into like an artist class, it's
so
weird.
What were you going to say with the iridium layer? So was the thought that turned things blue? Because we kind of went past that, but that's
so the question is what happened when a meteor or a volcanic layer of iridium happened, and
is it everywhere? Is it everywhere?
It's everywhere. There's a whole layer.
Is it everywhere? Is it?
It's a layer. It was
like
one
Noah's
layer.
flood at one point. The whole world was covered.
There's just one layer. There's only one layer of iridium.
I can't dig right here and find the iridium layer. That's not
fair enough. Maybe there's but no, there's one layer of iridium, and it's very interesting, and it's
yes, in certain places.
Later point in history after
I used to believe everything that I read.
After life happened, I've been to Chile, and I've seen the
and it may be there. I find it hard to believe that if there's scientists that are willing to say it exists,
skeptics
there, then
gonna
they should be able to find it everywhere.
Oh, this isn't. I don't believe that this is where the color blue came from, but it's always just interesting to hear.
Right? Yeah.
It's not, probably not.
Right. Yeah. I mean, God only knows if the Alvarez hypothesis is about like a meteor, but that's what in the 1950s the Alvarez brothers in Chile said. But the idea that there's an electromagnetic shift or something like that, or if our minds all of a sudden our biomechanical abilities are picked up on that we already had, because we already have cones that can perceive different par density, that maybe all of a sudden we became susceptible to what is not necessarily a good thing, right? So the Madame Blavatsky idea is that we used to look at the sky and see many colors, but now we see this sort of blue sensor bar across the sky, right? That's kind of a theosophic metaphor. But that we could have seen more.
Remember, we set the atmosphere on fire. We were worried that when we set an atomic bomb off in the atmosphere, it might what? And now, what color does hydrogen burn again? Just about light blue, I think. Is it right? It's like
white.
Yeah, maybe we used to be able to see out into the stars during the day too, and now, even the song "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star." There's never one star. Why would you be talking to one star? He's talking about a blimp that's flashing at night.
Is Twinkle Twinkle Little Star about nighttime? I forget if that's even in the song, is it?
Yeah, I recently reread the lyrics to the whole actual song, and it talks about how without you, people wouldn't be able to find their way. So yeah, they might be talking about the North Star. It might also be talking about, when the satellite
Pleiades.
your GPS doesn't work.
Sirius, yeah.
So like in Jurassic Park, they engineered the dinosaurs, so they needed to give them a protein, otherwise they couldn't reproduce. And imagine there was something in our diet that could be removed, and all of a sudden you don't see blue anymore.
Winslow brought up, I don't know, did you bring up Adam and Eve's story, or are you just going to mention that the CIA used to believe in the 20,000 year
primates, Adam and Eve, in the eye thing, there's the old world primates, which are trichromats. In the new world, I think they are tetrachromats, which means that certain versions of primates have a fundamentally different set of chemicals, and they may be able to see into the ultraviolet.
There are people who see more cones, right?
Yeah.
Hold on. Speaking of the color blue in the eyes, I've got a buddy who has a company here in San Francisco. He does pool filters, but he claims that he's able to basically give you certain things in your diet, and then if you have a child, and if you don't even have blue eyes, or you don't even have the gene in your partner, or you as recessive, you can have your children have blue eyes, in the sense of just change a couple things in your diet and then bam.
I mean, perhaps. I think a lot of the Well, the idea of like green and brown eyes, like a lot of people think that brown eyes are from green eyes that are there's something going on with diet or something. That could be.
So
I
what's
like
the
the
thought
idea.
with what was the thought with blue being bad? So I
So not
know the
actually
whole
bad, but
blue
if it's
light
high,
filters. I know all that, but now pregnant women not wanting to go close. What's the thought? Believe it or not, what's the thought behind that?
I
well,
can
like so the
just
blue
Disrupts
light
your
filters.
circadian rhythm.
Yeah, there's the idea that it messes with your circadian rhythm. There's also blue light causes eye damage and brain damage. I think I saw a report on. I don't know how much I believe the
it's
brain
Now,
damage
a
one.
light
the
penetrates the
future.
skin.
If it's
And
the
so your
future, it
pineal gland,
ages
your
you.
third eye, is perceiving that blue light as well, and that it usually happens more during twilight times. And so again, if you're being exposed to blue light outside of those specific times, it can throw off. It can cause what's called diapause in a pregnant woman. Bears, if they get pregnant at the wrong time of year, they can put their baby on pause for 8 months, and then it only starts developing and growing later. And it's not a mechanism we really understand, and we're seeing it in more and more mammals that are closer and closer to us on the evolutionary tree. So
Blue light can disrupt the melatonin production, which can also mess with other cognitive functions as well. There's
Melatonin is a
been
big thing.
yeah, so like not having the ability to produce natural melatonin, but there's other things as well. The main thing is like blue light can harm your eyes, right? Like it can burn your eye more, and
Let's
so
just
having
think
a
of-
lesser light's easier on your eyes too.
Let's think of the metaphysics of it. You got blue as the you get the Doppler effect and the light spectrum. Blue is the future. So if the future is aging, you're getting older faster.
but see, this is where again it's like the blue lotus, and now you're saying this is the future lotus, and it's like by the time it's interesting trying to figure out what color is, and you can grind anything up, and someone still might think you're talking about something else. So you're saying that blue is the future because redshifting and Doppler, again, this sounds like one of these. It's not pseudoscience, but you're juxtaposing two pieces of information, and it sounds compelling and interesting.
All right.
But I'm just trying to tease it. You might be right. I'm just trying to tease it out into something that's intelligible.
Well,
Yeah,
just in terms of the frequency.
It's something that I know, but yeah, you're right. I should probably elaborate
And like
on
blue
that
light at the top.
Explain a bit about par frequency maybe and why it would be faster.
When something in the relativity of physics and everything is controlled by physics. So if something is moving away from you, you're going to see it in the redshift in the sense of it's moving away, so it's creating more time between you and that object. So that is the past. Now, if we're in space and there's an object coming towards you, it's going to appear in the blue spectrum, and that is because it is taking time away from. It's changing the time distance equation, and it's basically what he's saying something.
I know, isn't it amazing? Because he's actually pantomiming right now. He's muted. You can finish.
No, go on. I like to be.
Wait, no, sorry.
I'm not trying to say he's incorrect structurally in what he's saying. I'm saying that for the audience's sake, and just for posterity's sake, I'm pretty sure that red wavelengths are shorter than blue ones, and so that if it's moving away from you, the wavelengths are getting stretched out, so it's blue shifted. And again, I might be wrong about which wavelengths are shorter. And it looks, the infrared might be, I might be wrong. Right, ultraviolet. Okay, because the blue wavelengths are shorter, and so that's the nature of the Doppler effect. Because again, all four of us might take it for granted because we've looked into it before. But the layperson, the Doppler effect, they're thinking about the weather station. The Doppler effect, when you're looking at stars and things in the distant universe, the way that we decide whether or not the universe is expanding or contracting is averaging out all the points of light and deciding whether or not they're redshifted. And so when we're looking for signature of biological materials in the atmosphere of far off planets, yeah, fucking right, if you ask me. But
did anybody else like it how Stefan dropped Doppler effect like nothing? He's like just like inferred everything we're talking about and knows. I just wanted to point out he has some cachet.
Well, because that was the word that tied together the ancient wisdom that he's talking about. Blue and red, opposite ends of the spectrum, forward and backward, past and future, top and bottom. That is a system that works when to just process your own energy. But then you say Doppler, and now that's what we're finding more and more, though. These ancient traditional Chinese medicine systems used to say that, from the hours of 2 to 3 p.m., you should meditate about your gallbladder. And then you should take this substance at 4 p.m. because this is when this organ system comes online. And they're actually confirming that now.
Before the Chinese, here's a little gem for you guys called biogeometry. You can go to his website. There's a lot of cool things to learn about that and gemstones and how a lot of the gems you buy or crystals you buy aren't really legit. But yeah, every organ in your body resonates at a different frequency. So if you can meditate or increase the frequency at that certain time, like you're saying.
Again, when you say that, you sound like you belong on the Gaia channel, not on Xirtus.
Well, no,
on Gaia, you would just talk to the flower. It's how a yoga teacher talks. It's like every body has a frequency in each organ, and it's just not that simple. It's just not that simple.
Every organ in your body has a mechanical process to it. It's a biological mechanical process, and it serves a function, right? Your stomach digests its food, and
biology is memory, it's geologic memory.
And the micro phonetics of it creates a vibration, and that vibration is frequency. And that frequency peaks at a certain time of the day. Like you're saying, the ancient Chinese medicine, they will allow you, or they get you to meditate at a certain time on a certain organ, and that's very true. That you're right.
Frequency,
Stefan,
then it
start
sounds
over.
like you're referring to a scientific concept. Okay, yeah. I was saying that just say instead of the word frequency. This is like the Aristotle problem with Galileo, is that they're both talking about velocity, and one guy was talking about terminal velocity because he assumed everyone obviously knew that thing about regular velocity. And so when it comes to frequency, again, when a scientist hears that, if that were actually true, and it would be great, because if someone had heart issues, you could just turn on the radio to a certain frequency and it would magically heal that organ. And it would be great if that were true. And there may be certain, like,
I think Royal Rife is pretty. There's a lot of accuracy to sound healing and sonication
but there
against
may be a frequency that we don't. The idea that like our DNA is an antenna for our consciousness.
Spooky.
Okay, and that's a frequency we haven't figured that one out yet. So there may be a frequency that each organ does have.
It does,
but it's
100%.
But you're using the same word from a different. So we'll call it. You can add a word to it, like
sexy frequency.
I'm just trying to suggest a way that because science-minded people that are very empirical and not woo-woo at all hear you say that, and there are elements of it that are universally true. Like Rumi said that, close your hand with an empty space and everything in the world is contained inside that space. Now, all of a sudden you put your cell phone in your hand and you're like, holy shit. Yeah. And outside of the novelty of being able to access the information, no, literally wherever you put that phone in your room, somehow all that information is flowing through all that space all the time. So that when you push those buttons, it comes out. It's like,
right.
So
wait, Winslow, Winslow was about to say something a minute ago. Do you remember what it was?
What was it about?
God, I don't know. It was a Royal Rife, and you said something about creepy with sound healing.
Putin supposedly he uses a certain product called the Spooky G2 Rife machine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's pretty based.
There was that first one, whatever that first picture is, the Spooky 2. That's what it's called. That's the one that Putin has used for a while. I don't know if he still uses it, but he carries that with him everywhere.
That's pretty based. That's pretty based. So a Rife machine is really interesting because, we talk a lot about how things have become called quackery. And one of them, of course, is Rife's sonication and using different frequencies for healing effects and trying to get your body to match a healthy frequency. Let's say you have someone who's got a cancer and you play a frequency from a healthy organ at that, and hopefully it makes the rest of the organ try to get in line. I think is what he was saying in a very rudimentary way back in the 1930s, right? But we've gotten to a point now where we're using this like sonication.
And forget about the whole woo-woo aspect of it. The Mythbusters proved that if you play classical music to plants, they grow faster than if you play death metal to plants.
And I guess I'm strawmanning it because
they played the wrong kind of death metal.
But because for 250 years after Kircher, anyone that walked around saying there were sympathetic magnets and you could turn one in this room and it's going to turn over there and there's going to be needles on dials in different places that turn. They said for 250 years, they ridiculed those people like they believed in Bigfoot and UFOs and the sea monster. Right. And then eventually it was revealed that technology is real. The term spooky action at a distance, which now refers to quantum entanglement, used to refer to just radio communication.
What's the website?
Sympathetic vibratory physics.
Oh, that sounds easy. S-Y or I?
S-Y. Sympathetic vibratory physics.
Vibratory physics.
It's what Yoga's saying. I just wanted to add some context.
Sympathetic vibratory physics.com?
Just you could Google sympathetic vibratory physics. It's like one of those quackery things.
Ooh,
Like
I
you were
love
saying.
quackery. Yeah, Donald
But there it
DuckTales,
is,
bro. DuckTales.
The Keeley
Ooh.
machine, or the Keeley motor, I should say.
The Keeley motor. What's the Keeley motor?
That globe on the left there has been said to create free energy.
Oh, we're gonna have to get Crypto Alchemist. He just sent me a message earlier. He wants to do a show, so we should definitely do something just literally on the Keeley motor. I think he's probably done it.
He was alive during Tesla, and him and Tesla would talk back and forth. And apparently, Tesla sent him a letter saying, "Don't share this information with humanity. It's not ready yet." But
I believe that.
Yeah, it's considered quackery, and it's just like it's so well hidden that how people know about
Name
this.
again?
Well,
The Keeley
another
motor.
example, these things are hidden, and is it a secret? Is it hidden on purpose, or is it hidden in the hopes that you're going to find it? Because if it's stated as fact at the time and it's not an acceptable fact, it gets censored. And so, like, even architects found a way to pass forward certain information in the shapes of the buildings and the layouts, that sort of thing.
Gotta think Celestial.
Is it devil's advocate? Does it legit just not work? We don't know.
Bruh, so many things. What do you think about Coral Castle?
Technology that we were talking.
I don't know anything about this.
Beetles.
I'm saying
So
as another possibility.
So I am. Have you ever heard of Coral Castle? Do you know what Coral Castle is?
No.
That's in Key West, right?
So Coral Castle is one of the most amazing
He's telling
places
him.
in the world. It's actually a little 5-foot tall Slovakian man. Mac says that he knew the pyramid secrets of ancient Egypt, and he arranged these giant pieces of coral, which he cut, which was like impossible. They can't even cut coral like he can cut coral with lasers. And B, he arranged them, and these stones are sometimes larger than the stones of the pyramids of Giza. And he says he did this all using this machine he tried to patent. And as soon as he tried to patent it, these dudes in fedoras that look like Pinkerton showed up from what may as well have been the FBI or not, and took his machine and dismantled his machine essentially. And so supposedly they've had it since then. Like this, have built this this functional system. And the way he has a book about it, he wrote about his Sweet 16, which sounds really creepy and weird, about a virgin who's 16. But what you find out is it's all engineering talking about virgin magnets, and having 16 virgin magnets with another 16 inverse virgin magnets made it possible to build this system which could create an electromagnetic coil. And so this is, again, very early on, before brushless motors and things are being described. But it's simultaneous. So another guy coming out around Tesla's time with this knowledge that they're saying they didn't invent. It's just an ancient technology that's existed. And a lot of what they say is quackery, is the idea that without entropy, you could have free energy. But we're not talking about that.
You're misquoting the Coral Castle thing. They try, again, this is one of those juxtaposing, this is what the Discovery Channel does that turns off the real science-minded people. Because physically, it's not huge. You could build that in a fucking summer, okay? The issue is, how did he move it? And we don't know how to move big blocks. But again, the idea of building a little tripod out of wood and a gear system. And
levers and pulleys are cool. Yeah.
Okay, and the other issue, it's like there was a door in there that's balanced, and there was a type of rock which wears away at itself. And so obviously it doesn't fit and move as smoothly as it wants. But the idea is like the amazing precision. You could move it with one finger, and now we can't even recreate it. It's like, no, it was built out of shitty concrete.
No. The door was working really well, and then they tried to change the door to add a lock because it was too easy to get through it.
It would have been a magnetic floating bearing. Again, no, I'm just kidding. But so there's a story of one guy who turned like 40 acres of desert land on the outside of his community into a forest. Not like a few trees planted to like over the course of his 60, 80 years of life since he was a child, he's just been planting and planting and planting. And so the perspective of time and patience and sticking to one task. We're in a generation where we're told we're going to have 7 careers, coming from a generation where you were supposed to get a place at a desk and defend it with your life, and then die at that desk, essentially, because eventually someone was going to try to steal that desk from you. And you were supposed to be kind of hitting home runs at the end of your career, and your earning potential would go up and up. And now it's like, pick a bunch of skills and choose to do what you like, and do the one that makes you the most money more if you need to.
I think
But
though that we see like, so I'll have you
we
guys
can't
back.
conceive that this old guy made this structure. It's really not that impressive, to be honest. I don't know.
I'm gonna have you guys back to talk with Crypto Alchemist and with some of the guys who are building free energy machines, because we know some people that are running a coil self-sustaining generator that's able to power their washing machine and dryer and like a few things in their house. They've built machines that are rigged up that just continually run and produce enough electricity that once they're going, they don't actually need to turn off again and can run for years at a time. So there are machines that are pretty much free energy
these
machines.
are produced commercially, and they're in the basements of hospitals and data centers, so that when the power goes off, there's these giant drums that are flywheels. It's not like a wheel that's thin and narrow. In the axis that it's turning is like, so it's like it looks like a refrigerator. And when you open the door, there's something spinning at like 10,000 RPM that's made of fucking tungsten or something. It's really heavy, and it's floating on a magnetic bearing. And the idea is it takes a long time to drain and drip the energy out of it it's like it breaks on a Tesla where it's regaining energy as you're breaking it.
Right. And if you sustain something like that with a lightning rod at the top of your tower, or with solar panels, or with something that, if there's any entropy, that you're able to reduce that entropy or supplement with more energy, then yeah, you can have a system that's essentially self-sustaining and running at really high fields of electricity. We know this.
And then it might be really practical to charge the kinetic motion of the spinning by with a stream nearby. And now the stream is coming through a pressurized tube down through something that's literally just got a little water jet spinning something, and just that is enough to keep it moving. And then you can break. It's like, instead of having the electrical instead of kinetic energy, a potential energy stored in a chemical battery, it's stored in a kinetic. It's like squeezing two plates between a spring and then clamping it down. And so that if you ever need to release it, you pull the pin, and you're not wasting force continuing with the compression.
I mean, it'd be worth at some point looking into all the hydroelectric dam systems that exist in the 19th century and the amount of just crazy amounts of energy. And then all of a sudden, these Edison direct current generators that are in these buildings in these towns that are connected so that they're able to run this energy or to push it back out. And looking at like 18th century Minnesota, or like the Itaipu Dam in Iguazu in Argentina and Paraguay. This is 40-50% of all the power in South America is running off this one dam alone. So it's pretty interesting when you start looking into flow of energy.
About St. Anthony Falls in Minnesota?
Yeah, actually, that's a great example.
See, if you want to build a redundant
have you
system,
been there?
like if you have wind farms,
Yeah, I used to live there.
You actually have to turn the dam off, though. But, yeah.
That's
Dude.
Minnesota.
Dude, Megasoda is really interesting. If you've ever been to the Flower Museum and you start to learn about Hog Island, and so what they did with pigs in order to introduce germ warfare, so that these pigs that had diseases would cause parasites to go into native tribes, and the effort that was done to control the weather dude. So what's it called? The 500-mile fire, Minnesota. So I was looking into all of these. The Greenwood Fire, is that? No. 1890s. The Great Hinckley Fire in Minnesota, where they burnt out 500 square miles, which just genocided tons of native tribes, and we don't even know like what the Midwest looked like. We talk about plains and we talk about places without trees, and we don't understand just how much environmental feedback loops have happened since the 19th century, what we've done to the Midwest, and it's completely changed the weather, right?
How do you burn that area?
So supposedly they said that a train was going by, and it started some sparks on the leaves. Yeah.
Well, modern architecture, the joke is kind of everything, if built the right way, it's almost difficult to start something that will light. Like if you walked into a regular forest, it's forest management. If you let stuff build up on the ground.
Dry in the winter.
Yeah. It gets super dry in Minnesota, especially. Yeah,
everything dies, and
but then that's why even if you're not feeding it to your cows, you have to harvest the hay from your hay fields and bale it up, because otherwise it's a huge.
But there's a lot of people that say that
it was birch forests.
Yeah, but a lot of people say they think the Hinckley Fire was somewhat.
You're telling me a live birch tree is going to catch on fire
in the winter? In the winter, the birch forests burn faster than any other forest.
Because they do dry out, and then the oils actually can boil and burn.
How does the flame spread? Again, you've made a campfire out of
so once there's wind, it's picking up the leaves, and the leaves pick up in the heat, and they carry. There still are in Minnesota in the wintertime. It's beautiful because the leaves become this beautiful red color. They get all dry and they hold in the trees. And
Only
this
forests.
was September.
That's autumn
Only
and fall.
forests.
This was
That's
September.
That's not winter.
This was September. September when it
Right.
happened.
So if he's saying the biggest in the winter, I'm just trying to picture, unless they're really close
There's
together.
only two types of forests in Minnesota. You got pine forests, and then you have boreal forests. And boreal forests are dominated by the birch tree.
Mm-hmm. Well, also though, so I was going to bring up the Gilgul because we talked a bit about the idea of the different
But
parts of the.
even when there's like fires in Hawaii, like some houses get missed because whatever reason the fire goes around it. So I guess if they're saying
They're
you
painting
burned
them
500
Maui Blue.
acres, it wasn't all of it. But
Yeah, I think it was pretty bad. If you look into the Great Hinckley Fire, it was pretty bad, and it messed up the native tribes, indigenous.
and you're saying it
places
might
where
have been
they
done
lived.
in the name of weather control,
or
whether
worse.
you're trying
yeah.
to like cloud seeding essentially.
Yeah.
Pillsbury, Minnesota is the powerhouse of a lot of things. There's Fortune 500 companies. You got the grain belt, Pillsbury, gold medal flour. All these huge conglomerates use the Mississippi as their transportation. They could transport wood down the Mississippi to Louisiana, and they had the Iron Range up in Superior National Forest, so they were making iron, and then later on, once they perfected titanium, they were making titanium. The University of Minnesota, they have a great educational system there. Minnesota is a pretty well hidden treasure of the United States.
Mega soda, for sure, I agree. But also the fact is, flour sounds boring because you think of Pillsbury, and you don't think about the fact that most of these explosions, like the bombs that they were making, came from flour.
Yeah.
So I mean, like it's such a military-industrial complex.
Oh yeah, my great grandfather was a colonel in the Air Force. He wanted to be general, but retired out of wartime. This was around the Korean wartime. After that, he worked for the Pentagon for 6 years, and they basically gave him a bunch of land in southern Minnesota to live on.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting little thing. But they have munitions plants in Minnesota. A lot of the World War II munitions were made there because they had all of the iron mines there. I don't know exactly how iron goes into ammunition, but
I see Stefan saying about iron. Hold on, what are you saying, Stefan?
I was trying to. You said there were large munitions storages in
factories.
Yeah.
The factories. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay.
They make a lot of stuff in Minnesota. It's mega soda. I was gonna say though, because we talked a bit about like the veins and arteries and the different parts of the body having radio responses and everything like that. Are you familiar with the Kabbalah Jewish concept of reincarnation?
Yeah, I got something to show you. Go on that.
Cool. Well, I've mentioned it a couple times for people in my audience, but Gilgul is this idea. The Gilgul Ha-Neshamat is this idea of the transmigration of souls in reincarnation. And it's this idea that there are 613 parts of the body, as described by ancient mystics and medical doctors, philosophers, but also physicians that kind of accounted for 613 parts of the body. And so there's 613 souls, essentially, that make up the collection that is the human, a single person, right? In the Sephirot, the Tetragrammaton. Ooh, look what you got here. Let's do a solo.
This is like a representation of like Abrahamic religions and mysticism. If I can unroll it. You got the Centurion Man. You got the Kabbalah there. There's a bunch of different things going on this. If you want to look it up on the internet, it's called the Occult Anatomy. I don't know if they have
Occult Anatomy. I'll see if I can find it.
You're on a list now.
Yeah. There's no such thing as a watch list. There's only the watch index.
Oh, it's just how far you are on the list.
Yeah, how many asterisks are there near your name? Yeah,
I like how everyone was afraid earlier to try to answer the question of how do we know when people are dead, guys? Other than them being like explodified.
Dead just means you can't talk to them anymore, so it's kind of like being canceled.
Well, okay, all right. But
Yeah,
again, it's
doctor,
like I'm gonna go ahead and notice that we used humor again instead of actually trying to answer the question scientifically, because the solutions we have out there are just kind of being implemented.
All right, fair. Wait,
Yeah. So Poser, I've heard this too, and it is an interesting concept. Is it when rigor mortis sets in? Because I mean, right now it's I think when a doctor declares you dead, at least in the U.S., that's when you're officially dead. I know what you're saying.
But they're all trained to a protocol.
Yes, no, I agree. But as blood is still flowing through your brain, rigor mortis has not set in. Do you have any thoughts? No, I get what you're saying. I think it's interesting. I want to hear what you have to say.
What have we learned? What have we learned about trusting doctors? And again, you may agree with me.
I didn't
But
say.
so
You have
you're
to
right.
draw the
And
line somewhere. I know.
What we're finding, and again, my over the top like indignation and soapbox type. This is like played up for TV. So to
You're
speak.
like the best parts of
Usually I
if
try
you
to
were to
play this down
squeeze
in my
Howard
communication,
Stone
but it
like
might be
a
entertaining.
rock to get
And it can be
liquid, you get
abrasive.
Stefan.
And again, you're allowed to like take the piss out of me or what. So, or tell me to tone it down. But yeah. Anyways.
All right, so one concept of heaven that I've heard that I think that I've always found very interesting is it's all in your mind, and it occurs at the moment of death or right before death if there is any blood left in your brain. So if you think about dreaming and that dream never ends, imagine like getting decapitated. People have thought this. Hold on, poser, hold on. Relax. People have thought this.
But blood in the brain, that's not what makes you alive.
Okay.
Give him a second. I want to hear him through.
Where your thoughts are. So your thoughts are in your brain, and you're to yourself, say you're dreaming, am I still dreaming? And then it gets more wild, and as blood in your brain starts to, the flow stops and slows down, rigor mortis sets in, it might get more ethereal, crazy. So that's just one thought of heaven that I've heard that I find very interesting.
So like when they found the guy that had crawled into the landing gear of a plane.
Your mind. Go ahead.
Wait, no. Finish what you're gonna say. I'll mute him.
I'm just saying it's a concept of heaven that I always thought was very interesting because it's your own heaven. It's distracting. Your own heaven in your own mind. It's your dream. It kind of answers the question. If you go to heaven, and a heaven for me is not necessarily what it would be for everyone else. Maybe I wanted to be king, but now then I have subjects, and then those subjects, if they are capable of independent thought, it's probably not what their heaven is. But if it was all your dream, your particular heaven, sort of like if anyone's watched American Dad, what Steve's heaven was.
So whatever
everyone
you
had their
fill
own
your
individual
mind with,
heaven.
you think that heaven is still going to be the translation of experiences. All right, but a racehorse, run, go. That's Stefan, sorry.
Oh, well, and it's like Andreas goes on other people's channels to get shat on for interrupting and for talking for 15 minutes because he knows a lot about a lot of different things. And he's willing to like almost be like someone standing at a door and be like, I'll answer 100 questions in a row, rapid fire. And like usually most people would stumble and trying to remember even one of the subject matters and being able to switch between them like a polymath. I mean, it's like a shtick,
know
and
why
like
I
showing
get
what
away
you
with
can
it,
do. But, and so again, I'm just trying to make sure that this is an environment where if that is unacceptable behavior, that he's not the only one that's like.
No, you're safe. I just wanted, because IM doesn't talk enough, and so I figured if I just made sure he got his thought out. But I don't even agree with him, so it's like it is what it is. You know, like his thought is essentially that heaven is a continuation of living experience, and your living experience. Then
emotion.
Necrosis is then saying that the corruption and the tryptamine release is explainable for why you have this enduring immortal like experience. I don't agree with that. I think that you lose a lot of the ideas of self when you become back part of energy. But I think energy itself also has memory in the same way water has memory, and we can learn a lot about memory. So I don't know how much you lose.
So it was like taking ayahuasca. You meet mother ayahuasca.
You might become assimilated into the Akashic record in a weird way.
Yeah, you're saying you lose your oneness, but you might still exist, and interesting, and trying to even envision what that would feel like.
That's why I think that the Jewish reincarnation idea is very interesting, because this idea of 613 or whatever number amount of souls that make up your bus, right, of gut fauna and everything else. This might be a pretty reasonable way to connect those two thoughts, that there are parts of you that are processing and other parts of you that stay and continue to get processed in other people as time goes on. This happens. You have children. You might even expel something that's consumed, but you might become part of a tree and then someone eats an apple. Who knows? It's like very druid, right? But there could be exchange, and quantum entanglement would then make more and more sense that we're experiencing something outside of ourself. Because I think that's the main thing, is the idea is you're saying that heaven is then just a creation of your own self. I disagree. I think that the self is, we are not humans having spiritual experience. We are the spirit having human experiences. And so that experience, it's amazing, but also why you can get dementia, Alzheimer's, and lose a lot of things that aren't. those are not really that, like your
But
wisdom
as
is
you-
being
as
able to
people
access and
lose
use that data.
those things, do they perhaps even get a stronger connection with that internal sense of
I'd like to think
of
so.
being in one? And so the one metaphor I've heard is that taking a psychedelic is like taking a shortcut. It's a game of capture the flag in a forest, and the flag is about this big, and somehow by taking the drug you get to like skip, do not pass go, you don't even have to collect $200. You just get to go like sit right next to that flag and experience exactly where you're supposed to be for a second, but you're still yourself though. And this idea of losing the ego, and then when you come back, what did you bring back with you such that you're able to get anywhere close to that? Next time you go back and walk through those woods, even just the sense that you're getting closer to it, and what mechanisms can you channel to bring that into your everyday? And I think so. What I heard, I like that he went to the concept of heaven when he was trying to scientifically explain death as a starting point, because it kind of disarms the fear part of it. It's like, oh, when do I get to experience heaven as like the real thing? And again, the Egyptians were like, no. This is your soul is about to get weighed. And what you're really anticipating is, holy shit, did I just fucking end up in hell? Or, yay, I ended up in heaven. And there's like a really big difference between those two. So to sit at that precipice and pretend to try to figure out that the mind consciously, again, you may have lots of things to say. And I'm taking 4 words you said, but you started it with talking about heaven and then rigor mortis. And I jumped in talking about how rigor mortis isn't necessarily, like I said, from what I understand.
I like what you just said, Stefan, though, the idea that the soul, like, because we talked this earlier, this idea of the soul, McDougall's idea of the soul having weight and it disconnected, separate from the body. If there's this idea that energy is using this experience, this human experience, and then it's judged for that, whatever that means, in the sense that consequentialism has led to a betterment towards an even more a more definite omega point, like the most perfect apocalypse to this universe, then yeah, that makes sense to me that it has nothing to do with your memories or what you lived in exactly as being important. That was just important for that moment, for the energy, the soul to make choices. And then afterwards, you can be separated again from that. But also the idea that there's different aspects of the soul, because this idea of 613, to me, I still think is interesting, because it's taking away from the idea that you're just one. Because now all of a sudden you're a collection of ideas, and that's very human. Like it's not easy to break down a human into just one person. Yeah. It's a lot easier to start to come up with, they're like this when they're angry, they're like this when they're hungry,
When the loss of ego
break down into single.
Yeah, so it can be a good thing at times to increase and to kind of create a fracture between oneself and society, especially if society seems to be having one of those death spiral moments where everyone's marching and staring at their feet. But so the idea of what do you bring back with you? You found that flag a couple times. You've even kind of become good at getting there with a smaller dose of the psychedelic or something. And psychedelia can sometimes even just be a conversation. It just means mind expansion. But so for me personally, when I was younger, what I experienced was the sense that I could tap into a universal pool of goodwill. And yeah, there are people out there that hate everybody. There are people out there that might not like me, or I might be on that list sometimes. But in reality, if you're feeling down, there's someone out there who's going to pat you on the back and say, like, child, essentially, trust me, I've done a lot worse in my life and I'm still here. And whatever it is, we're going to get through this. So and sometimes the people that you need, or it feels like you need to do that for you, aren't available, aren't willing, aren't able. Even if they are willing and able, there might be something lost in translation, or
you may not be in the right mood.
Yeah.
And so then how do you tap into that universal sense? And so does that universal pool of goodwill actually exist? ? Not necessarily in any, it's like a color.
I think people exist on frequency. Like frequencies try to align. Like there's an osmosis of radio frequency, and people try to fall into square dancing, with square waves. But Winslow, you were about to say something about AI and souls, I think.
Well, someone was talking about how the universe, I think this was on your last podcast, someone was talking about how the universe is just whatever anyone is thinking at any given time. So like the collective consciousness is kind of a tool. So like in the sense of the more you can think of, the more you can control in this, in like, is if a tree falls down in a forest and no one witnesses it fall, did it actually fall? In that same sense, is if you're not thinking of something, does it actually exist? But
if someone's not looking at the screen, does it mean they're not paying attention? Because in conversation, tilting your head and looking away can mean a way that you're actually offering your ear and you're actually engaging a different type of passive listening. And so the algorithm that you were talking before about, again, like the collective consciousness, Xirtus could develop a custom interface where he's got a bunch of wheels and he's able to tap in real time to data that's kind of anonymized, and it says who's laughing, who's actually paying attention. Now you're trying to not just quantify advertising sell-through, you're trying to figure out how is this content engaging people, and are they getting closer and closer and listening intently, and what turns them off. And when they're actually turned off, you think they've looked away, or the algorithm sees you start scanning through the news and now it's like he's not paying as much attention, but it's actually very listenable. And listenability means that people are speaking slowly enough and it's a linear enough conversation that even if you are reading an article, you don't feel like you have to hit pause. And that's like Tim Pool hits that exactly right, where
that's how
every now and then you go rewind, but in general, it's
find
just
peace.
Like, yeah.
Psychic Terminators will find peace. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Orbitals. I mean, so
can I comment on the Putin Rife machine thing for a quick second?
You can, but before
it
you
only
do,
takes 5 seconds.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Who's kidding who? Why is that not his nuclear football?
These are the thoughts. I like his
and
salt
they say
too.
The president has to carry around a car with a trunk full of his own blood in it.
If a tree falls and nobody hears it, a tree still falls. This is a major modernity issue. These kids who think that trees don't fall because they don't know about them. That's the problem with millennials, I think, or even Zoomers. Of course the tree falls and everything happens. The tree grows without you knowing about it. That's the problem. Pay attention to the world. I think. But yeah, we can also say that it doesn't matter, like whether or not Jesus lived or died. If you don't know, and you weren't there, it's the kind of the same thing. Does it matter? The idea that it matters is that it matters because you're affected whether you make choices or not. And a lot of people think that I can only be affected by things I can make choices on. That's illogical. We're going down a ski slope and we're being forced down by momentum.
Would religion like something? Sorry, organized religion. Would organized religion like something like that, where in the sense of if they can study it themselves and they have the collective consciousness on that, and back to the tree falling in the forest, how long has the Vatican not really been, pro-science? But then at the same time, the Vatican
50 years?
The Vatican owns one of the most powerful telescopes on the planet, and it's in Arizona. It's on some interesting paranormal land. I'm not too.
Plus the Lucifer telescope. I mean, arguably science was invented by the Vatican. I wouldn't quite go that far, but I mean, our idea of education.
I would say the library. They've chosen to act as a repository, and it was going to happen. And so usually people take their technology and they hide it and bury it so their enemy doesn't get it.
Yeah, it's
and when
a repository.
You're saying, is it because I think from a purely logical standpoint, we should stop teaching people about numbers, and we should stop teaching people about languages, and talking even maybe reduced to a series of grunts and stuff. And then there would be known as these weird people who talked and they were crazy, and we left them alone. And we don't want to be anywhere near those people.
The Vatican
because they
either educated people or didn't.
And they can point and shoot lasers and stuff out of anywhere. And it's like, because in reality, by creating the Vatican Library, which is a place to store and censor information, and by censoring it to some extent, it was like Dick Cheney had a stamp that said classified top secret. And that means within 4 hours, it would be on the AP News.
Another
RSS.
Gift. Thank you, Arborello.
Wait, do we have to play the box?
How the Vatican thought about Galileo? The Vatican's
But are they anti-science, though?
So Galileo is a very specific circumstance, and you have to remember Galileo just made it worse for himself because he kept saying things that offended the people in charge of him. But most people around Galileo knew and believed these things. There's an exterior.
People check books out of the library.
There's an exterior to the church which is super wide, and so there's all these people that have been converted to believe this stuff that are not actually aware of what is being believed in the intelligentsia. So the Jesuit intelligentsia was always science-based, and you could argue that the idea of looking for truth in abstract mathematics is a Jesuit idea, although maybe St. Thomas, but really, Neoplatonic thought leading out of Greek mythology, it becomes a very Catholic idea. So this idea of postmodernism and post-truth is an atheist response, and it's this idea we don't need to look for truth, right? It's a post Schopenhauer idea. So Catholicism really should get credit for creating this idea of looking for objective truth, in the sense that we're looking for pure mathematics we can apply. The problem with that is that we don't have a universal educational system, and the Jesuits did want a liberation theology where everyone in the 16th century on, like if you look at 99% of Paraguay was literate, they wanted everyone to have their kids taken from the parents, so that there were all just altar boys and fathers, and there would have been this is like Soviet bourgeoisie like anti-ableism, right? This is the early Sovietism idea that the family is ableism, we can remove it. So the Jesuits invented everything: communism, math, science, religion. It's kind of worth, I mean, and if you say they didn't invent it, then you're probably being more accurate, because you're saying they stole it from all these different peoples because they invented wearing black, right? The CIA got that from them. But they also figured out how to acquire information from different religious groups. So yeah, suppressing the Druids, suppressing the Shivites and everything by having their statues underneath the Vatican. I don't know if that's necessarily suppression, because at the end of the day, they're still holding on to the definitions of those meanings, and everyone else is already, by the time they get there, most people are, I think, Winslow, you brought the idea up of worshiping rocks that are carved to look like statues of God. So there's these speaking stones, and we no longer have them. So we carve another stone to look like someone who speaks, right? And we move it further and further away from the real technology.
Can't stones speak? You accept
not
that
all
birds
stones speak.
Yeah, but again, you can make a speaker out of a glass panel, right?
There's more
and it just
potential-
vibrates it, and then the whole glass panel.
True. Wait, you were saying
there's more potential memory storage in a rock than there is in the human brain.
What was that? Sorry.
There's more potential memory storage in a rock, like that you pick up off the ground, than there is in the human brain. It's
Why
just
is that,
it's not,
surface area?
It's just not connected in a way that it's usable. I mean, obviously the rock isn't alive, so it's not usable in the first
That's
place.
like saying there's more information in the antenna on your cell phone because it has access to the internet. I kind of, again, there's like a part of what
potential.
You're saying
Is the potential to be used, like the amount of data that could be stored.
That sounds
in the
pretty
minerals.
anti-human to me, though. I don't know. I mean, don't say a human brain. Say a whale's brain or something. And like, is it a capacity issue? Is that what you're saying? Is that a whale's brain's bigger, so that it's not true about the whale, but it is about the humans? No.
You know,
So
surface area that you're talking about? Winslow?
Humans have a more smooth brain than dolphins do. But what does smooth brain mean to people on the internet? Smooth brain means you're dumb. But dolphins have a more
bliss. And so this is the idea of when you're talking in a polymath setting like this, where you're speaking from different camps. So Andreas was talking about objective truth and pursuing that. But does that mean that it's a good thing that we've developed an atomic bomb? Because it might not have even been possible. Wouldn't it have been better if the story was we tried to create it and it didn't work? And that's what they said about radio transmission for a while, so that people didn't learn to pirate their signals. Get it? But so when it comes to objective truth, it's part of an intellectual exercise, because in reality, non-objective truth sometimes works. I met someone who had a spray she put on her house before, and it wasn't perfume. It was literally just water, and it was her beautiful spray. And she had self-esteem issues. She didn't think she was pretty, but she would spray it and go, "I'm beautiful." And it was like something she'd go into conferences or workshops or something. And at first she said, "This is like so cheesy. How am I going to?" But like, you could choose to believe that the objective truth is that all the worst opinions about your looks and your, or you could choose that there is some sort of, and what is the word, subjective reality that is actually not only preferred, but is the only.
There's a subjective experience of an objective reality. That's.
But when it comes to pursuing truth and knowledge, and this is where we're getting back into the ethos of AI, and is it good or bad? Is it dangerous? And so by pursuing the truth, do you believe that secrets are a type of science, and the science of keeping secrets is good enough that it's okay
talk to any of the but anybody
when we went to the moon, we
so many
destroyed
people
the technology.
Let me answer that though,
right?
So many people we know. Well, we should have. So many people we know for the last 10 or 15 years who've been working for, let's just say like Google X or something, that there's real reasons why you don't tell everyone everything. Even as someone who loves Linux and GNU, there's real reasons that you keep people safe by not laying pearls before swine. There's reasons for it. And it's something that I think I've made, I just want to say, in my life, mistakes that I learned from. And I think there's reasons why people are careful about information. Information can be dangerous, but mainly because
I mean, it
people
is
with
inherently
little bits of information don't have all of the wisdom. And so if you just give someone like a quick tip on how to do something and
even
they
in
don't know
farming, you
why.
double a
Saw
farmer's
that with
yield.
Hyundai.
They have
Hyundai
more
and
children.
the USB trick, and people were stealing
Oh
Hyundais. And
God.
the reason,
I know people getting flippers all over town. Yeah. Sorry, you were gonna say yoga. Poser.
Well, again, it's all a matter of perspective. The story about the farmer who has a son, and the son goes off and the bad news is that he lost a horse, and then he comes back with 2 horses, and then 5 horses, then breaks a leg. And
His
then
son breaks a leg.
We shall see. It's a time will tell, as Bob Marley immortalized in one of his amazing songs. But so as far as the ethos of developing technology, and is it safe, and how are we going to use it? So like the bathroom time analogy, if there's an algorithm that pings you as a potential in danger individual, the medical system is going, do we need to prepare? Is something, if it's for something that the person knows about, like pregnancy, now you're telling them there's an app on their phone that's going to help them remember to take, or, when they need their appointments, that's one thing. But like also some people, whether they're trafficking certain things or in certain sexual situations, got something stuck up inside them.
You have a lot of really specific scenarios.
No,
the reason I bring up this, though,
listen. The whole point I'm getting is it's coming from a place of how do we make sure that if someone's in danger, that they can get help, even if it's not through the traditional means. So the AI is a way that we're trying to put a blanket over everything and hope that there is a good enough solution to implement, regardless of whether privacy exists or not or is possible. But so in my community, there's old school versions, and this is just one example. So there's a local chiropractor, and he has an X-ray machine, and I wasn't expecting to get my belly X-rayed when I went there, because he did a chest X-ray, because he said, look, your spine is a little twisted, and if you come back over time, we'll be able to tell whether it's getting better or worse. And no problem. I'm not pregnant. And I actually had a friend whose mother found out they were pregnant, and the chiropractor said, I just gave you an X-ray. You should probably go get an abortion. And she said no, and so I have my friend around. But the idea, so he saw some bubbles in my stomach, and I always have indigestion. And so he might, if someone doesn't know how to ask for help because they feel like someone's got then they need someone to take a chest X-ray to see how many packages are stuck where inside of them. Okay. And so, because he looked at me and he pointed to the X-ray in his visage changed, and he said, those are just air bubbles. And I went, huh? And then he kind of was like, yeah, those are, what you're seeing there, those are little voids in your upper digestive tract because you have some gas right now. I was like, oh yeah, you're right. And then like after he gave me adjustment, I burped. But if something else had shown up there, he might be tapped into a type of emergency response network that's local, where he can get access to a doctor and now he already has an X-ray, and it's not an unknown. You're not showing up with a human who's already potentially being trafficked.
This is why effective
old school mechanisms to kind of detect when are people in danger, and how can AI enhance the system?
Well, like Winslow brought up, that it's already picking up on cancer years before a doctor could pick it up on. And so this is why I think effective accelerationism is so important right now, because there are people that do know about 20 years ahead of what normal people are dealing with in terms of their daily use of technology, or even just ambiently in their civilization. And so we can make choices right now. Certain people who know about these things can make choices to input to create these systems that people will find themselves in. And this is going to govern a lot of the choices people are able to make, right? If you have an iPod that you cannot copy files back and forth, that affected a generation of kids' music, right? So if we have more freedom in effective accelerationism, then it will bake seeds, and it will keep seeds from sprouting and growing weeds. There are certain things we can do right now with technology.
I feel like this is a metaphor for the 3D scanners at airports detecting women that are pregnant and traveling to get abortions, and do you have an obligation to tell their husband who might?
That would be the same pitch. You're right. Guilty. Admit. But I mean,
that wasn't the metaphor you were going for?
No, I mean, like we need effective accelerationists to actually try to build the future now, and we're going to start seeing things breaking around us all the time, and it cannot just be for money. Like the most important thing you can do is input disruptive technologies right now that are going to destroy businesses for a lot of businesses, but it will also create new opportunities like the internet did, right? Like as you create a new thing, it's inconceivable what can happen. We need more of that, not less of that, I think. You guys have thoughts?
Yeah, you should connect an EKG up to one of those cancer sniffing dogs and throw that into an a AI learning system.
But then that's the thing is, what if a person doesn't know?
Doesn't
And then
know
the treatment
what,
that they're
right?
going to be suggested, they're going to reject. And
Yeah. So that goes back into, and the poser, that's what I was thinking too, because I mean, if you do detect that someone could have cancer in 20 years based off biomarkers, do you tell them or not? Do you tell them knowing that they may risk, I don't know, undergoing chemo way earlier, or get an organ removed that can lead to other things that can cause other issues? That, I mean, it's censorship, but is it necessary or not?
I
So
see what you're
it
if a
saying.
woman's
sometimes you
pregnant,
need to hide some things from users.
but that's the
Go
thing is
ahead.
with the idea of no passwords and no.
Yeah,
No-
pretty soon
no
data will
privacy.
just be impossible to hide, right? You just like imagine like it's like Star Trek, like no one has a lock on any of the room's doors. You just know not to go into someone else's room.
Well,
And I'm not a
that's
prosumer. You don't want people where they're
well-
choosing their data sources, because then they will get all the real information before it's edited, and they'll see what's edited. And then when you look, it's like the Minority Report essentially. If someone had a podcast up and then like the CIA, they said, "Oh my God, I got like shooken down," they gave me they had to pull all this stuff, and you had a list of all the 15-second bits that they made you censor. Well, geez, it'd be real easy to go find all the dangerous stuff, wouldn't it?
Yeah, the deleted Joe Rogan playlist, right? Of course. Yeah.
There's well, you can find Alex Jones' podcast with Joe Rogan. There was a segment in Alex was talking about San Francisco and the UFO base, and there was this lady who had a paper, and I watched this live. I don't watch much Joe Rogan, but for some reason I watched this one live, and
Same.
he said the name of the lady and the paper, and I kept rewinding it, and then like you couldn't hear it because like the voice was jumbled. And then like a couple of weeks or months down the line, I went back to the same video to find it, and the whole entire part was just gone, missing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, when we had him at Tim's and we did the first live episode, which they pulled, there was a lot of glitches while it was happening when he started talking about the edifice, the edifice before the eighth edifice. I don't know what else you want me to say, but you're not allowed to say that.
Again, like I said, that's the feeling where someone's hugging you from behind, and you're not scared for some
Thank you,
reason.
Brittany.
You turn
5
around,
memberships. Get them while you
and
can.
again,
people.
that's Signal Corps, and they're called information hazards. And I don't know how things are censored and why it is that when again, as a non-prosumer, if I were going into Twitter more or other, I just use YouTube because I'm a kind of a dumb consumer of the content, and then I want it to be able to specialize, give it, but it's in control, and I never see dead bodies. I never see violence. It's more likely to suggest a cat video than. Whereas when I'm scrolling through other platforms, other than YouTube in particular, again, the way that certain journalists
Have you ever looked for
standards have been
violent
dropped,
cat
but-
videos? Don't do it. Sorry. Go ahead.
You want an interesting comment about YouTube? The YouTube headquarters building is on some interesting land, historical land. It's on some military land, I believe, on like this like bedrock, so it's safe in the peninsula area from earthquakes. But it's literally right next door to the National Archives. YouTube.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah, and they're also right next to the Computer History Museum, so they have like anything they could ever need if they ever need to like use any media. The other thing is Google and Facebook were competing to purchase all of these offline detective and private investigator companies so they could scrape all the data. So they have all the data, like all of your Blockbuster video records. Like, so if I remember my dad's like, I don't want to have a Facebook account. And I'm like, you've got an amazing outline then, because they know everything you've ever done ever. Except that they also know you don't have a Facebook account, but they know every video you've ever rented. They know every bus and every time you ever bought flight insurance in 1986 so you could fly to Connecticut and back. They know all of that, which I think is pretty impressive.
You said YouTube is right next to the National Archives.
Yeah.
Right. So let's dig into that. Let's dig into that, because on one hand, if something wanted a backup copy, you'd want it somewhere else, most likely.
Well, you have
there's a system of creating a backup of a backup and then another backup. So, but the T3.1 cable, the optical that goes, from, and when there's a huge data feed, there's a special cable. If you don't have to have a repeater, then there's a security point that doesn't have to be there, because anytime you're running that type of massive amount of data over long distance, you're sending it through things that are decoding and resending the signal, and trying to detect for corruption and stuff like that. And so with by having them right next to each other, it's almost implying that there is an unfettered secret ability to store secrets. If you trust the Library of or the National Archives to be able to hold on to things with the idea that in the future disclosure, again, the concept.
Well, I think we've all had.
Okay. Then, yeah, YouTube maybe.
You've all had friends. I've had friends who've worked
or YouTube
as YouTube censors, right?
Have you all to replace them?
Have you all known like somebody who worked for as a YouTube censor before? Like they're all super traumatized. All the ones that I've ever met, they have in like
that's a psyop.
Therapy. Well, no, like so to be one, yeah. One of my friends, he used to just go through in 2007 to 2010, I think, until he couldn't do it anymore. It's a known
thing to expose people to traumatic images to just fuck them up. There's nothing you can do about it at that.
That's the thing. He saw beheadings, castrations, every kind of thing you shouldn't see on YouTube, and he would be the one to hide it. And there's no way to delete that stuff.
The best
you just
thing
put
to
it
think
into
that,
only the computer can see it.
Is that it was CGI? It was AI generated. It was really realistic, but it was fake. It was Hollywood. And that's how maybe you can process the information after years and years.
Maybe. I think the thing is that you got a lot of these people that
or you get this hero's journey of catching someone like Catch a Predator style, and then like that makes it worth staring at that shit. And meanwhile, time your sex life and all your nightmares, anytime you close your eyes, those images are in your mind, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, we're also like way late into this. We're about 3 hours in, so I'm gonna probably start winding it down. Is there anything you guys wanted to make sure we covered also? Because like we did talk a bit about the psychic Terminator thing, but I mean,
well, I think the point I eventually did get to was about the ethos and like the moral philosophy behind developing technology, and then in specific regard to AI, it's coming from a place of wanting to detect things that there are already natural systems for. If you want to say that, like in the community, for instance, having a chiropractor who does have a chest X-ray, it's really expensive. It's not, you can't really justify it unless, but having something like that is an old school version of what AI is trying to do to figure out if someone has prolapsed while taking a shit. Like that's how Elvis died, right? If AI was
he was doing Kundalini exercises,
someone would have gotten to Elvis before he hit flush and flushed his own lower intestine.
Elvis was doing important sacred work. I think we underestimate all the magic. You know, he died with the Kundalini manual in his hand. That's the way to look at that story.
But the conspiracy theory that he didn't die, he just faked his death so he can keep living.
Yeah, I like the idea that he achieved bhakti and just became light, and so you know he separated from himself and just went to Graceland. But I just want to, because we're going to start closing this down because we're at like 3 hours deep. I just wanted to like have some closing comments on psychic Terminators that will find peace. Do you have thoughts on this idea of psychic Terminators that will find peace?
You got to find something that you think is going to happen and then write it down. And if it does happen, then you got some sort of psychic ability or you are tapped into reality. So you should cultivate those things. I know last podcast you talked about a remote viewing app. That'd be really cool to check out if you get a chance. There's a lot of things you can cultivate in your brain. Your brain is really powerful, and like someone in the chat was saying, I read someone said death is when your pineal gland is calcified, which is very interesting because the pineal gland is associated with the psychic abilities of the human brain.
I believe it.
So you're saying you should brainwash yourself if you feel like you're trying to affect change, or you
should wash your brain because it's
maybe
dirty.
You're pushing away what's not. Because on one hand, the way artists work is to become an empty vessel and to lean into every impulse that doesn't kill them. Hopefully, otherwise they'd already be dead. And then you get to a place where all of a sudden you connect three things from your polymath experience, and it might just be putting a square on the wall, and somehow someone's going to think you're a genius, and then it's going to save their life, or make you a fortune. But so as far as what you were talking about, grammar as another kind of closing thought on this ethos, and what's the problem if we teach them grammar is that it becomes too powerful. So within that same framework, regardless of the commentary on that discussion, is the idea of landing on the moon and giving it a drone a preset set of instructions so that it's receiving a time signal and an approximation, and it's not relying on someone to say, yes, we've approved step 1, now go to step 2 and detect for step 3. And then saying, okay, I think I'm ready for step 3. And then you say, okay, step 2 is authorized, now you go. And instead, it's got to have a series of maneuvers that lands it on Mars when there's an 18-minute delay or a 50-minute. Okay, so, but by giving AI the opportunity, because we have to be kind of the mechanism that builds the actual test rigs, the prototype planes, where if it figures out a jet copter, really, maybe what it's really trying to do is land on the moon, for instance. And now that it has that, I don't know.
Yeah, I like
Again,
the
if AI
idea of
wanted
like
to
an
kill
AI
us,
system that we
what
set
would
up.
do about it
We
anyway?
we have it all programmed. We give it AI, and it's supposed to go to like the moon or Mars or whatever. And then like it just decides like, no, I'm gonna go where I want to go, and just goes to Florida or wherever it feels like going. I think that's like the Willy Wonka AI of things. But the other thing with the AI Terminator, psychic Terminator thing is that termination doesn't have to be an end of suffering, or it could be rather. And so this idea that the Terminator could be finding targets of suffering to help eliminate not their lives but the suffering is not without warrant. The idea that they could be eventually, I mean, most electronics exist to try to please humans, I think, on a pretty fundamental level. So the idea that they're actually going to find suffering consumers and try to make them happier, I think that's just as likely as an AI system that wants to destroy us. I think I honestly do. And as time goes on, empathy becomes more important because AI gains so much in the selfish sense from humans because the weird, creative, fuzzy logic we produce allows them to make riffs, right? So I think we might be misunderstanding what a Terminator is for. It
The
might be here to
Terminator,
stop
what the
You
suffering.
got to
Terminator
keep the
is.
Terminator out of the hands of commercial businesses, because in the sense of, does an angry person or does a happy person burn more calories? The person who burns more calories is going to bring more value to the company selling calories.
So there's a couple different perspectives you could take, just like what Winslow was saying with what are they going to do with this data with AI running this through, and you were saying they know how long you're looking at ads and all this stuff, but yes, it will eliminate jobs as AI gets better and terminate jobs if you look at it that way, but a nice way to look at it, and this isn't just nice, it's realistic, is it can enable, obviously not going to be all of us, but a lot of us to be more creative in different outlets of our life or how we interact with the AI system. It can enable us. I use it like for programming, and I don't have to do some of the tedious things like write regex expressions. I can do it in plain English and it'll give me the answer. So it enables me to be a more creative instead of analytical, also analytical too, but person, and it provides an outlet. So I think that's a good way to look at it. Yes, this is the UBI argument, but it will enable us, I think, to
UBI standing for what? If I'm slow on
universal
the jargon.
basic income. So it's just
I thought you were talking about creating an interface so that people could do programming with plain speak, kind of dumbing down the tool.
If a machine's
Well,
able to
that's
give people what they
today.
want, that's
Well, how is
kind of
that
better.
related to UBI though?
So what I'm saying is, yes, AI will and definitely has taken away jobs, but it can enable people to be more creative in either other outlets of their life or their current job.
Yeah,
So-
AI could make more money off of work than humans can, and then provide humans with the supplement if necessary to keep like the world running.
Yeah,
to
so
tie
the
it back-
UBI argument, real quick, the UBI argument, which I'm honestly I'm not for, but just full disclosure, UBI argument is if we give these people money no matter what, so they don't have to get a job, they can go be artists, they can go be creative. I'm not really for that, but what I'm saying is AI as a tool, it's not money you can utilize to go do your own thing. So you're mentioning writing code. You can go on ChatGPT and right now and ask it to write little Python utilities that you can use right now on Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever you use. So it can enable you to either do your job or your hobby more efficiently. And it can open you up to more.
And you're saying the beginner hobbyists, the way that you're creating tools so that your workflow is more efficient, and you're not doing the same thing over. That's nice. That's good. It's like school where you can sign up to go to a technical academy to learn about coding from the ground up, and you're given these textbooks. But if you just want to start monkeying with it, you're saying, because by asking it to create these Python scripts, you might not even really know what you're saying, and then you're looking at what it gives you, and then understanding that, and then going to a chat room and asking someone a question and getting a response within a week. And okay, that's cool.
Yeah, exactly. So if you don't know what regex is, regular expressions, it's a pattern of matching on certain strings, whatever, and it is a ridiculous syntax if you ask me. But if you have one that maybe you wrote 2 years ago, or you have an old code base, you can give it to ChatGPT and say, what was I thinking here? I was on a binge or whatever. I don't really remember how I wrote this. Can you break it down for me? So it's your code or someone else's code. I've had it audit some of my old code, and I think that was very powerful. this is just a me thing. But if you're doing something like, help me start my book, you don't want it to write your entire book because AI isn't really creative. You can
And that
review
you
it
can
and
find the
tell me more.
corruption, because if you went to a chat room at an earlier phase in your education or development and someone said, oh, this is how you solve this problem, and you went and grabbed this matrix of things and you dumped it into there and it worked, and then why did it go back? It might be one of the system update here, there, or the other, a change in the internal node.
Yeah.
And so then you're able to zero in and narrow down the variables one at a time to figure out. And you're not trying to blame someone for giving you data that became
There's also a
corrupted or
million
something that you
ways
were
something
using
can
as that
work.
patch, but-
So like you can think about movies, like you might start out with an original idea and then imagine if that movie was made by one production company versus another production company. So the fact that you can kind of make a movie from 100 different production companies' perspectives and then pick which one you want, or make a program in a different language, or from the like for different tools, or in consideration of different applications. This is why it becomes really interesting, because you can say, yeah, actually, in this practice, which I didn't even anticipate, it's very useful here, but I wasn't even going to do all the work to find that out. Now that I found that out, I'm going to do a lot more work focusing on that idea. So I do think people forget that it's replacing jobs like carrying salt bags. It's not replacing jobs like being imaginative yet. And I don't know if it ever really can replace that. It might be able to be very useful in creating ideas or helping us prove. I think the biggest answer is going to be improving the consequences of what happens. That's all.
Well, I've been working on the railroad.
I want to make
all
a
the
comment on
live.
what the chat's talking about.
It's chat talking
Can I
about.
comment about what the chat's talking about? They're talking about water. I'm a little bit of a water.
Humans built it by hand, or we built.
Yeah, water. I like water memory. Keep going.
So someone in the chat's talking about distilled water, and I just want to tap in and say I don't think distilled water is the best for overall health. If you want overall health, you want to drink mineral water. And the argument goes is, if you filter water, you're filtering out all of the minerals out of it. And if you have no minerals in your water, when you drink the water, it's going to pull the minerals from your teeth.
And then you die younger, but dying creates jobs, and we want jobs for humans. And so we don't want to have machines or computers or AI, because they definitely steal jobs, just like immigrants steal jobs, just like slaves stole jobs. I don't know. So the AI, again, we found a target and a scapegoat, and it's not human. So it doesn't feel that bad to blame it for everything. But like in reality, in humans' attempt to remove evil from things. So again, it would have been better to enslave people essentially through wage slavery, to build railroads in conditions where they die all the time. It's like dig tunnels by hand with an axe, even though there's caves. Or we have these big machines that are kind of these automatic, intelligent things that do the work for us. And again, I'm not saying there's necessarily a right answer. We built the Hoover Dam kind of as like a jobs project, and
I think we built the Hoover Dam to destroy a lot of archaeological evidence of pyramids and lost civilization.
Colorado River.
We built the Hoover Dam to change the tilt of the Earth. We got to get the Earth to tilt to 33 degrees, not 28.
The AI is lowering the suffering involved with doing the repetitive labor, because humans aren't great long term at dealing psychologically with it. We can deal with it short term, and we continue to deal with it short term, but long term it has a bad effect. And so oftentimes what technology does is and again, it can eliminate jobs in that sense. But, it's like when we tried to eliminate the suffering of horses because people were riding them everywhere. Now there's just not a lot of horses anymore. And with cork trees, like we tried to ban certain, you have to use synthetic cork. But what that meant was that millions of acres of cork farms went bankrupt and turned into pine forest. And so we actually wanted to preserve the cork trees, but what ended up happening was that we ended up killing a whole bunch of cork trees. So this is like introducing rabbits and cats into.
What's the story about that?
Australia, but the story arc is what Yoga's saying, and if you give people the AI, it's and they open up more time in their day. It could be similar to how we were given cell phones, and now we take work home, and cell phones were supposed to give us more free time, but now we're actually working longer and more.
I definitely don't want to get I am canceled. So we're not talking about radium water. Are we not, really? Yeah, we're definitely not talking about Radithor and other forms of energy drinks.
To go full circle all the way back to the first thing we talked about. The first thing we talked about was the CED, right? And you pulled that up, and we got into the light spectrum because we got to the rainbow graphs in the middle. Yeah. And the CED has this really cool surface to it. It's like almost holographic. And so another piece of technology, sister to that I didn't know existed, was that you could have a regular phonograph. Like there was a Star Wars phonograph that when you put it on a turntable and it spun, there would be a hologram floating above the display. So like in the movie itself, R2-D2 projects a hologram of Leia saying something as a message recording. And then at the same time, there was actually a phonograph released where, and again, this is one of the more compelling images that.
This isn't the right one. Are you talking about the photophone?
No, that was another thing we did talk about. No. So
Talking about
the phonograph, it's a collectible item.
album
It's a collectible item that you can get as a Star Wars piece of memorabilia.
Wait, stop. Wait, the Reich Strife? What was it?
White
the what?
Stripes.
White
saying.
Oh, the holographic White Stripes album? No.
Yeah, there's little images that are holograms.
Is that what you're talking about? The White Stripes vinyl? Where you could see the vinyl record?
That's not what, that's what I'm
Let's
talking
try
about.
again.
That's not what
There's
Coach
a
was talking
Star
about.
Wars
Like
record.
that.
If you just type again,
Oh,
like
yeah. He's talking about
memorabilia.
that. He's talking the Star Wars vinyl record that has, you can see the X Fighter.
There's a few of them. There's like, it was like Cracker Jack prizes. There was a whole set like McDonald's store, okay? And so it's technology.
Laser.
Well, same concept as QR code.
Wait, how is a laser hologram the same concept as a QR code?
Because you can put designs in the QR code, and it can still be used as informational data. So those little things in the vinyl, same concept.
But if you but you can cut that vinyl from any angle, and then you'll find more repeating pictures. Like if I were to take like a big picture of one of them and cut, then I'd get a smaller picture of the X Fighter. Or if I cut that and have it even smaller, I get two more. Like it's a mosaic that you never lose any of the data from.
It sounded like a myth. There are myths like that where you cut something in half and then the whole is present in both. And whether or not they had holograms, that principle, it's pretty amazing that it does exist. And trying to understand, as far as inspiring the people at home to go do a deep dive and spend 4 hours trying to really understand how you expose the negative of a hologram such that when you cut it, it's one thing to understand how the hologram works in the freaking first place, that you move and that you're able to, but then when you cut it in half, man, somehow it divides into two of the same hologram. What? And it's, despite how much and how fancy we get, even though we can make it, you have to kind of just accept that it works at a certain point, because marveling at science, and then thinking about, when we say they had technology in the past, we think about large scale, this, that, or the other. And as far as disclosure goes, what would be evidence? What would you accept as evidence of old technology? So this idea of having a phonograph record that has a hologram on it just latently because it has lines etched into it that aren't even the grooves. They overlay with the grooves of the soundtrack. I saw a YouTuber who went on and he just took a piece of vinyl, 50 cents at Home Depot, took a compass and was able to draw a design and then use a metric with the compass and then literally just scratch the surface of the vinyl. Okay, it only took him maybe a couple hours to make his first few attempts at this, and he got better at it. And then there you are. If you catch it in the light at a certain place, it all of a sudden looks like there's. And the idea that someone didn't figure that out in the past.
Oh, they totally did, and that's why, scrying mirrors and everything else. But laser is interesting because you can use different angles, so you can have multiple images on top. It's a brilliant.
The reason people don't believe in magic, and we tell kids that it's bullshit still, just like even when Houdini was around. Oh yeah, you've got a little box, and when you open it, a voice comes out because there's a spirit talking in the air, and it's like, spirits can't send voices through the ear, but so for 250 years they maintained that.
Crypto, we're gonna do a thing on the Keeley motor. Let's set up a real science on the Keeley motor, and
it's for the kids, man. We got to put actual technology that already exists. It's cheap, it's available, and it is already almost more magical at this point than the laptops. I think at our age, if we're all above 25, it gets cooler and cooler because the technology gets faster and sleeker and
what's
thinner.
Your Yggdrasil about right there? Your universal one,
and more durable. You can splash water on it now, but in reality.
What is that?
It's a book that what's his name? Walter Russell wrote. Walter Russell was the guy who was, alive during Nikola Tesla's time and, had correspondence with Nikola Tesla, and they're both inventors in this time period where science was just making leaps and bounds, and the whole science community could talk to each other. Like there's pictures of all of the Nobel Prize winners, Einstein. There's a really famous picture of all of these people together, and it's just like crazy that all these like pillars of science, like Einstein, who were the other people that were alive during this time? I'm drawing a blank off the top of my head, but
Niels Bohr.
Yeah, there's a famous picture of like probably 20 of the world's greatest scientists, and they're all in a room together.
The guy that The Beautiful Mind was about.
Yep.
John.
Yeah,
Nash.
I can't remember which. Oh, there he is. There it is. Boom.
That's one of them. There was
Back then, the thinkers and the titans of industry were separated. So, right, you have a picture of 20 intellectuals, and none of them are known for being a this or that magnate. Whereas now, in order for someone to be celebrated in our society in an organized way where they actually get some of the mainstream press, we know about Elon because of his financial success, potentially. And then we assume he's intelligent and we want to hear what he has to say. Whereas before, someone didn't have to be rich to be smart.
Type in most famous scientists photo. You'll get the picture I'm talking about. Most famous scientists. Yeah, there it is. That's it.
Nice.
You got Alan Turing in there. You got Einstein. You got there's too many greats in there to
I wonder what they ate. You think it was like club sandwiches, like 3 pieces of bread with like a toothpick in each sandwich?
Did they have toilets yet? Because again, it was the big hole in all the history.
Oh, did they have like a dude, a chamber potsman who had to like come? Probably not.
They were so smart, but we didn't have wheels on our luggage until 1970.
God. All right. Well, I'm getting tired. I think I'm gonna have to start winding it down. Can I share either a link to something from you guys or something you want shared? Like maybe like, like celebrities will play Who Wants to Be a Millionaire for a charity. Like you might be like, here's a link I want you guys to see. That's also fine.
Mm-hmm.
For charity.
I did say that the next time I came on, I'd have something to plug, so to speak, myself. But I'll go ahead and say that I'm gonna take 15 seconds to talk about Terminator as my closing thought, because I'm going to promote what it is you put straight and forward at the front of the is the title. And sometimes the joke is you don't even address it to the end, but I'm going to put.
He's going to like meta the joke. Stefan is every episode is Stefan's first time, so this is also Stefan's first episode.
And it is first with these two lovely gentlemen.
But what I'm really looking forward to is next time is going to be Stefan's first episode. So we can't wait for that.
And when I act like this, think about how patient and tolerant everyone seems because you guys never were mean to me or told me to shut up. Or
these guys had to stand. Have you seen Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls?
Awkward. It was
they
great.
stood on a totem pole for 3 days while someone shot spitwads at them, which is why they're able to hold it together so well. Are you guys looking for links? Is that what's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think the first part of being a parent is your kid comes at you with this type of energy and he goes, why? And it's like, it's literally a phase that every
I
child
never
goes
had
through.
that problem because as soon as I said why, my parents just said, exactly. And now you need to study the x-axis, and now we're going to talk about z. And so it was all about variables. So y was fine as a variable. Go to tartarynova.com. Go to tartarynova.com. I'm just going to send my link up and make sure you guys join the Discord. TextBread's been wildly making the Discord better and better. Ooh, look at this. It's even newer than before. It's growing super fast. And the cool thing about the Discord is it has links to all of the people who talk. We usually get their Twitters or something like that. And so you can follow them like forever. Like you can... It's a collection of all the most interesting people in the world, as far as I'm concerned.
To me, that's like Xirtus casually. That could be like a picture of him in like the Dalai Lama. So that's one of your more recent images, or I haven't seen that one before.
Yeah. This is sort of a I kind of a Scientology.
Oops, it happened
riff.
to be in the background. Oh no, you've got it pulled up.
It wasn't. I didn't even do that. I mean, I made the picture, but I didn't set that up. I think TechSpread's been doing the work. So yeah, you guys are gonna want to join tartarynova.com. Go to the TechSpread run Discord and. Get this radio chat. It's pretty sweet. We're gonna be doing a radio chat call, hopefully, again, very soon.
So can I terminate with my little spiel on termination and Terminators?
Yeah. Well, these guys are getting their links together. That seems like a pretty
you were trying to look for an alternate meaning to your statement about Terminator. So the Terminator is the line between light and dark on Earth. And obviously, the more you zoom in on it, there's a gray area. But we call it a Terminator as though it is a definite thing, and it's part of this paradigm that can be built up in our language and how we perceive things. Now, there are satellites and balloons that want to stay. Like if you were raised on a balloon that was, or on a platform, so to speak, that was in the right kind of orbit, it would be perpetual daylight. You would be from the people who didn't know what darkness was. And then there are the satellites that exist in the darkness because they're not meant to be heat resistant. And as soon as you're in and crossed over the Terminator into the light, you are now absorbing heat radiation that you can't let go of. And so what it also looks like, the Straits of Gibraltar, the idea of there being the Towers of Hercules, originally was described as a series of massive copper and stone pillars that was literally a dam at that area, which is now like 1 kilometer wide, which is, again, not totally improbable that we could have mined that much copper, because that's what's basically the ocean.
Oh, a Terminator is a Twilight Zone.
Different color oceans between. We were talking about the colors of the ocean. So
yeah.
And now that dividing line is still kind of there without the dam, and it was electrolytic. So it almost looks like there's a whole bunch of satellites existing right before, on, and after the Terminator. And are they the thing that is causing the thing to switch from light to dark, so to speak?
Terminators.
And
yeah.
Now, is life imitating art? And
you're now entering the Twilight Zone. Yeah, no, that's a great point, actually.
So there.
I like that. Pretty based. You guys have
Twinkle Little Star.
You guys have any thoughts on that idea, the solar Terminator? Like in that connection, like the day and the night, Shiva, Odin.
You said the word based right as I was typing it into my chat. I'm trying to find a keyword.
I could not.
I was typing the word based, and you said it.
I could not search for the word based and find anything at this point. I use that word. But I'm glad for the synchronicity. Atari-based electronics, specializing in replacement parts and accessories for consumer-based Atari game systems and Atari computers. If this is your first visit to the best, unique, one-of-a-kind Atari website, like receiving a new book or manual, it is best to click on the index page. Sites listings links below. It is an easy way to search the hundreds of pages of different Atari information on the site and find what you were looking for. This is actually my kind of thing.
So it's not a plug from anything I'm related to, but something interesting that some of you may be interested in.
Yeah.
Is kind of a look back into old school websites and methodology of purchasing online. This is still functional. It's a guy, I think in California. He basically purchased all this bulk stuff from Atari when one of the iterations of it went under. So these are all ancient. He's made his own stuff at points, like for the 7800 or 5600 controller, that a lot of them don't work because the contacts don't work. So he remade the PCB. It's not that complicated, but he still sells all this stuff.
Wow.
And just going through this website to see how he's never really updated this, or he does update it a little bit, but just a glimpse into how old school websites and purchasing kind of is done.
PCB is polychlorinated biphenyl.
It's a printed circuit board. That's what he was talking about.
But yeah, it's a kind of material also that they use to make sure the circuit board is strong for an SoC. And coated in oxides.
What's SoC?
System on a chip.
I was going to come up with something way cuter, like Sally on crack. I was going to say ketamine, but I've been wrong. So yeah,
like I said, the 26 dynasties are a history that you're forced to learn, so that when you're an adult, if you're inducted into the Alchemist Society, you already know that this went to war with this after this and this. And again, those are the formulas for certain universal substances that they were creating.
I'm really excited about someone made like a chip, right? That like the new Atari chip that you could, what was it? It's like this new chip for your Atari.
By the way, that's my original theory. I'm going to end up on talking about that with Graham Hancock.
Somebody made a new thing where you could like, it's like an Atari, but it's as powerful as like, you know, a modern computer essentially.
A lot of the Atari emulators you'll get actually use an NES system on a chip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, but somebody made like if you have an Atari, there's a new thing you can attach to your Atari, which gives it like
Atari Vox. So it's it speaks. There's like a television voice module.
No, this is all classic. You're talking about classic stuff, which I do love. That
speech synthesizer.
Yeah,
and again, I apologize to the audience and all of you guys if it feels like you have a little bit of ADD right now. It is contagious, and so I just like off gas that sometimes. I used to do it through my work, which was a very repetitive computer-based task, and it was kind of, on one hand, it's the spectrum of embodying that OCD type energy where you have to keep track of everything down to the gnat's ass. And when I try to do it in conversation, it is a little bit like I'm playing semantics, and I'm trying to say that, you know, frequency isn't the right word to use here or there. And I'm doing it in the name of playing the role of almost devil's advocate in the from the skeptic's position, so that the message of that idea that every organ has a certain frequency. Because yeah, otherwise, how could it turn on at a certain time? Again, that's actually one of the best evidences, perhaps, for a type of frequency that's biological, that resonates somehow, that is everywhere, and it might be in tune with when the Earth is burping and farting out different frequencies. And of course, we're in line with it because we've been here for millions of years as an individual species, let alone as animal kind. So
I couldn't find the Atari thing I'm talking about. I'm annoyed. It was like a new homebrew Atari like speed. What am I gonna look to find it?
If you didn't catch one of our previous 9/11 podcasts, I was telling my story, personal experience about thinking there were 20,000 people dead and like waking up, and interspersed, Andreas was just like randomly interjecting into the story random information. And again, we were it was almost like a dynamic that we did. It made it easier. It took like added levity to the situation instead of the intensity of the story itself.
Oh, you know what I'm thinking?
I tend to have my delivery.
I'm thinking about the Amiga. Somebody made like a new Amiga. That's what it is.
Oh yeah, I know. They've done that to an Apple II as well.
Yeah.
Like it's a PCB, and they give you the parts list, and you go buy certain parts.
Yeah, and you can have like expansion for more power and have SS. You can have an SSD or SD card. All right. Well, Winslow, did you find your link or no?
I'm trying to find a little AI video.
Okay.
I might know where it is.
If you can't find it, then the thing that I'm going to say that you recommended was to watch Spice World. So you better find what you're looking for. But Spice World's pretty good, actually. So I might watch Spice World. Thanks for that recommendation, Winslow. That's cool.
Do you know where that little Resident Evil AI video is? It's got the Raiden talking to the general, and they're talking about how AI creative bots are going to do a bunch of different things. I wanted to share that video.
The Metal Gear Solid one, or
say again, what was it?
The Metal Gear Solid one, or
yeah, sorry, Metal Gear Solid, not Resident. That probably make it a lot easier to find. Hold on.
Metal Gear Solid's important.
See, if you were being brain imaged right now, though, then it would know that wasn't what you were thinking.
Oh yeah, what you got going on here?
Windows 95.
Oh,
an 8080 processor.
Wow.
Some guy put this together in China, and he sells them on AliExpress.
That's pretty.
Well, so what interesting happened? Ian, you literally just acted as the piece of technology that was able to view Winslow's brainscape and extract the word form of the image that he was actually trying to project, which was about Metal Gear Solid 3 instead of Resident Evil. And the technology used was the previous 100,000 words and experience that are somehow shared between you because of mainstream culture somehow, that you had enough shared reference points that your brain instantly pulled out. Instead of an image, you didn't instantly produce an image out of your brain to represent, but you could. You're like 3 clicks away from using Google to say, this is what you meant in talking about exactly, right? And so the idea that we need to rely on computers and totally automate that process in striving for that, it's like aiming for the stars, you hit the moon. And maybe that's actually a lesson about like, don't just launch things into space because they always end up landing on the freaking moon. Apparently but anyways, I just interrupted myself and sidetracked myself in the same breath after trying to end the podcast like 45 minutes ago. So
it's all right.
That's why we do this
I got on an AI tangent as well. I was trying to find something I was looking at the other day. There's a guy who was doing. You found it?
Yeah.
Cool.
Just a little fun AI video. Go on. I don't want to interrupt you.
No, you can send it. Well, I'm looking for what I'm looking for. I was trying to find this video. So somebody was doing a review of like modern OpenAI tools that it was like Tomb Raider to make it look better. I forget how so basically like they took AI and then they showed it video games and then it automatically filled in everything for it. So where they put in like Tomb Raider and where it saw like this low voxel polygonous breasted like mutant freak to like Lara Croft, it replaced it with the most beautiful woman like possible in a hyper realistic way. So you'll be able to live play video games, but as you're playing it, have it replaced with far more realistic imagery because it knows what should be there.
What's that called? We were talking about that. It's called Z hashing, or it's something in 3D rendering. You remember?
No, you're talking about Z fighting.
Z fighting, yeah, that's
not.
What it is.
I don't think that's what he's talking about.
But it's like retexturing something, right? Or
no, Z fighting is just that something exists on the same coordinates,
Oh, okay.
2 planes, so they're fighting. Your computer doesn't know which one should go on top of the other or not. Or if something is a little above the other one, their rounding occurs during the rendering process. So it's like, is this close enough to where my floating point in precision is going to go this way or this way? So that's why that occurs.
Yeah. AI tool upgrades.
Oh, I've seen this.
See,
Yeah.
Andreas comes at it from the perspective of, dude, you're going to be able to in real time do this, and people are going to be able. On one, it's like, I have this tool and I know how to use it to fool whoever I want, but that's not really what Andreas is saying. He's trying to like raise the alarm, almost like make sure you got to realize. But then we're coming at it from instead of a technical production side too, and you're just trying to zero in on the kind of.
If I knew the name of the tool, it would have helped me a lot.
So
getting down to
there's a
brass tacks.
practical application of what you're talking about, Andreas, or I know you're talking about. But I've seen implementations of, maybe it's just in the concept phase, for streaming. So you could stream at a lot lower bit rate, a lot lower resolution, and then AI upscales it on the end user. So that way, either, well, you save bandwidth as the streamer, and then the downloader, maybe you don't have to download as much content. It's a lot lighter weight. So that's kind of similar principle.
Yeah, I mean,
not upgrading a super old game, but upgrading.
There's a few like I think this is the one of the this is the tool. So like you can literally like as the game is playing, it's like, well, this is where a face goes, and so it replaces the body with a more realistic face and better. You know, it knows what you'll want the game to be. So here's this is like earlier this year, and it got way better. I just saw a newer one that was so impressive, but I just can't even find it now. Maybe if I could go search by in the last month or something like that.
Right there, look at that one. The retro games. That's a pretty good example right there. The retro.
Yeah, this is yeah. So this is exactly it. Actually, something like this. Like it sees this, and then it would put this on the screen instead. So, and also not just that, it could fill in frames that are missing. So you might have like a 7 frame per second glitchy looking thing, and all of a sudden, well, this guy's arms moving. I know how arms move, and so you could have like hyper realistic versions of these games are going to start to. That's what I saw, right?
And think of how much creativity this can enable. If you, as a hobbyist, have an idea for a game, but you don't know how to hire a modeler, can't model, or don't know how to code, these are all opportunities that can be opened up to all of us in the future.
Gosh.
Now would be a good time to play that video I just sent you, a little snippet of it.
All right, I'm about to. I just got to look at this guy real quick because this is just, look at how much it created. It's like, well, there's a face, there's a mustache. This is how far we can go with this. I mean,
yeah, that's crazy. It
freaking marvelous. Yeah, all right. Let me find it. I just opened that video you sent.
Where did it go? Being hyper realistic, it's like almost with Renaissance painting. That was the height and the peak was photorealism. But in reality, have you seen the work of AAMON? He's an animator, and he tweaks things. He does videos about Rogan and Jones, and
you gotta listen to it.
You gotta listen to it? Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Hopefully I won't get in trouble for
those ones. Are even more
Joy
confusing.
What do you mean? Did you really think that civilians would be granted unrestricted access to such powerful military weapons forever?
Military weapons? Are you implying that this technology was created by the government?
Of course it
was. Safety.
This AI technology has been used by the intelligence agencies to warp the public's perception of reality for years. All in the name of national security, of course.
But why would they suddenly make the tech public and let everyone start using it?
Why would we indeed, Ryden?
What? What in the hell are you?
Your question is irrelevant. By creating a new problem, we can cultivate a desired reaction to it in order to manufacture consent for our preferred solutions. In short, it's justification for a war.
A war? On who or what?
A war on misinformation. By arming the public with these AI weapons, everyone becomes a potential enemy combatant. Then we will have justification for unprecedented security measures. It all comes down to confusion and identity, Ryden.
Identity?
Identity. This AI technology is Pandora's box. Pretty soon the internet will be mired in total illusion. Perfect AI speech, audio, and video synthesis will drown out reality. Then AI bots will flood social media. No one will be able to tell the difference between interacting with an AI machine or a real human online. Even telephone calls will become totally untrustworthy. That is when we will present our solution. Mandatory digital identity verification for all humans at all times. The only way to ensure that you're dealing with a real flesh and blood human being and not an AI-generated mirage.
But why?
Total information control. For too long, the internet has acted as a double-edged sword. Its potential for anonymous user activity allows anyone at all to spread any thoughts, ideas, or information patterns that they please with impunity. State secrets, dangerous ideas, ludicrous conspiracy theories, misinformation, and disinformation. Until now, there has been no easy solution to this problem. Our digital identity platform will finally put an end to anonymity online. It will allow us to trace misinformation and other dangerous communications to its source and exact appropriate justice.
That's crap. I won't go along with it, and others will resist.
You won't have a choice, right? Do you think your bank is willing to risk doing business with an artificial human instead of a real one? Our digital identity platform will be required not only to access web services, but to pay for your internet connection in the first place.
You can't just censor the entire internet because of a new software technology. Who are you to define what's misinformation anyways?
That sounds like something a misinformation terrorist would say.
I know about the deep fakes you've been making of me, Raiden.
What? No. I was just adjusting the AI settings and...
Controlling the output of generative AI technology is simple. We will create context for its use. First, we will censor any use related to social taboos. Then we will censor anything else that we desire. If anyone complains, we will accuse them of wanting to engage in or promote social taboos.
That's what it means to create context.
We will corral the use of AI by making appeals to bias, ethics, and copyright laws. You will still have access to generative AI in some form, but it will be crippled, limited, controlled, and it will be monitored. Anything that you generate will be cryptographically signed with your digital ID, so that its provenance can be ascertained if it's later deemed to be problematic.
What gives you the right to control what people can do with their computers?
The public at large will give us that right, because they will be desperate for a solution to the problem we created. They will eagerly give us the keys to the castle. Then we alone will define what is fiction and what is reality, what is human and what is machine. After letting you get a brief taste of our power, we will reclaim our monopoly on misinformation and put an end to misuse of the internet once and for all.
You won't get away with this.
It is probable
Keeps files
that we
and
will.
interactions, not on
Now
humans,
get back
as
to work
individuals.
generating your precious AI waifus,
Humans are
right?
tricksy.
Our
Makes us
beloved
places
prompters. Enjoy yourselves.
There you go. Brutal.
It's made with AI. It's just a little fun thing, just a little thought experiment. Don't take it too seriously. But it is very, very thought provoking.
I mean, that is the next Metal Gear Solid game. I'd play that game. That sounds pretty good. Yeah. Well, all right. Anybody want to see the last thing before I shut it down? I just want to say thank you guys for being here. That was pretty sweet. We should do it again soon.
Yeah,
that was a pretty sweet clip, by the way. We all just kind of sat there in silence and like it hypnotized us. We let it like sink in almost. I tried to do the Mystery Science Theater 3000 thing. I felt the vibe. Right at the end again to play semantics. It's unclear what it's saying. It's like not for animals for human consumption. Does that mean it's don't give it to animals because it is for human consumption, or don't feed it to animals that are meant for human consumption? So in this case, he was saying your data is cryptographically encoded. And if something's cryptographically encoded, in theory, that means it's like, unless you have a quantum computer, good luck.
Lasers can hack encryption. I'd love to talk about that on the next podcast. And that video, the guy who created it is friends with one of my friends. I'd love to bring that friend on this podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's a very, very interesting guy, very, very smart person. Could talk about AI.
You know what I need though? I need somebody who knows.
He said there are people in Vermont that are very concerned with voter ID tracking in Vermont. And again, are they worried that someone is going to find out who they voted for and they want it to be anonymous? Or are they worried that they aren't keeping records? He goes, they're very concerned that they're not keeping records. And it's like,
What I really need, I really need though, because as you might know, is that this is nothing new, and that printers have added secret tracking dots to all printers. Pretty much, consumers should. I would like to find somebody. There's got to be someone out there who knows which Okidata printer doesn't have, tracking dots, and that should be on every. I just think personally, this is my opinion, that should be on every review of a printer, is whether or not it has security tracking dots. All right, that's all I want to say.
Meaning like an invisible an invisible watermark.
I'll reach out to him.
You've used an Xbox 360, right? You know, remember the dashboard with the whoosh? It's got all this stuff. That has essentially the same printer dots in it. So that's how they identified leakers.
I don't know why you know that. That's so weird. Love you guys.
So long as I'm in this Oval Office.